yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Mm.
Good evening and Jai Hind. I'm Aditya, and a very warm welcome to one and all. Today, we are on a very sad day, on a very sad moment. Basically we are remembering our Bravehearts, General Bipin Rawat, Madam Madhulika Rawat, then Brigadier Leader, then Lieutenant Colonel Harjinder Singh, whom we today paid respect, and other brave rest 10 other brave heroes. So it is a very sad and tragic incident which happened on 8th. And today, to console all this, we have amongst us very eminent luminaries. Uh, to start with it, I would request our Executive Council member, Admiral Shekhar Sinha, to start with a small token of remembrance so that from GCTC he gave a small tribute to General Rawat and others whom we lost. Admiral Sinha, over to you. Admiral Sinha, you are on mute, sir.
Can you hear me now? So thank you, Aditya ji, and namaskar to everybody, those who have joined this meeting. Now, it may be a bit surprising to know that General Rawat and I were quite very close, shall I say, professional friends, if you like. Of course, he's much younger to me. And I first met him when I was in HQ IDS, and he was in one of the directorates in, I think it was either MO or he was in, possibly in PP. And he would come for various meetings, some committees which I used to chair. That was quite occasional. But when he took over as the Chief of Defence Staff, he began sort of interacting with people who had been in the IDS headquarters. And he knew that I was there for a very long time, 3.5 years really, including being CISC. And there was no CDS, so willy-nilly CISC used to do many of those functions except for being Chairman, Chiefs of Staff Committee. Acquisition, advising Honorable Raksha Mantri on many issues in which he didn't want to take it too far to the chiefs of particular service. And then occasionally he would call me to his home. I happened to meet Mrs. Madhulika a few times, God bless her soul. So it was quite a shock. In fact, on 28th of November, we were hosting a reception for my son's wedding. Very sort of short notice. I could not invite many of my friends, and because we had already slipped by almost 2 years. The moment I sent him a message, he replied back. He said, "Sir, I'll be there," and he came on 28th November in the Air Force, Subroto Park, and he spent about 2.5 hours. And he came to the stage. He was wanting to stand in the queue. I pulled up his hand and I brought him on the stage and made him meet my son and daughter-in-law. And thereafter, he was mingling with people, my relatives. They all took photographs, my friends, and I had a lot of Army and Air Force colleagues there as well. All my bosses who were there. Then, and he waited for me till I finished seeing so many people. And at the end of it, we sat down, we had a drink together. He had already eaten. And then I went and saw him off. He was vehemently opposing. I said, "No, you came as a friend, but when you're going back, you're in public eye, you are the CDS. You are, higher than all the 4-star generals. I must see you off." He was feeling quite embarrassed. I said, "No, General, I have to see you off." I went and actually saw him off at the car. So that was 28th of November, and nobody can believe, my brothers, my sisters, those who met him, they said he was so easy to meet and he was so loving. He didn't refuse anybody for a photograph. What I found him was, that a lot of people used to complain on, when he took some very bold decisions or said something very openly. And I would always SMS to him that, General, this was this was damn good. Don't worry about the, what people say. There are only few who will oppose. Those who are sensible people, they will always say that General Rawat has done the right thing. And that is one of the reasons why he was so popular. You saw that what happened, on the day of his final departure, final salute, as if the whole Delhi, the whole country had actually come out. So I think to command that kind of respect is it's not easy. I felt very bad the whole day. TV channels kept asking me if I could come. I just declined because I didn't have the heart of coming on any channel. Till very day before yesterday, I think some channel. I think Bhupen Chaube's General JJ Singh was there on the panel. So I said, okay, let me speak. So I think that he didn't mince any words. And somebody asked him that General, you said something on that day which was not politically correct. He said, I'm not a politician. I'm a military man. I have to be correct by principle, by militarily correct. Only politician can do the politician's job. I'm not a politician. Many times he made statements which was really politically very incorrect. And he was also possibly told by the Honorable Prime Minister कि भाई जनरल साहब थोड़ा धीरे हो जाइए types. He would say कि सर मैं तो military mind बताऊंगा. He has shared this with me. He used to share many things. I mean, I can't say this in forum. All the movements of people up and down, postings, Air Force, Navy, virtually everything. He would just say, sir, you have time. And then he will start chatting. So I, I just don't know. I still can't believe that he's gone, really. I can't believe he's gone. A man with so much of conviction. He was so sure. He always asked me that, the Navy is asking for this thing for Maritime Command. You think we should do it? And if I told him that, give it a thought or give me a couple of days because it is a question of, whole country and India's future war fighting ability or the doctrine, he would give me a couple of days and then he'll remind me, sir, you haven't told me about this. Or if I felt something that, he was possibly some amendment could be done, I would always revert back. And he always had a patient hearing for me. I don't know why. I never had very close sort of, but possibly he was looking for somebody who had been an IDS, somebody who told him that what was the thinking process in 2010-11 in COC meeting when this Chiefs of Staff Committee was going on. Because I was there at a very critical time. When for the first time the three chiefs agreed to have a permanent chairman. And I went with that letter from COSC to Sri Shiv Shankar Menon. That time he was NSA. He said, this is a milestone. I said, sir, what I'll do is you better call all three chiefs. We shouldn't feel that I have just signed on their behalf, Chiefs of Staff Committee, IDS headquarters. We must call them. So he had tea with them. He had, General Vikram Singh, he had Nirmal Verma, he had Charlie Brown, Chachi Brown, and they were all opposed in any COC meeting. The only meeting I got them to sort of come together, I immediately made a letter. I said, before they forget. I mentioned all this to General Rawat. So, see, all of it, file reading going back 10 years is not possible. It should not be expecting. Easier was to call a guy. You know that he is repository of some information, ask him. That is the beauty of that man. He could actually identify who's got what kind of information which is good for a tri-service organization. So I can only comment on tri-service, really, I can't comment on. But as a human being, I found him a great man. In a very short time, I've been so impressed that not only me, my whole family, my elder brother who's gone back to Bombay, he is so sad. My brother-in-law, my goodness, they were virtually in tears. The whole day they were glued to the TV. He said, can't believe we were with this man. He's so easy talking. So that's all I can say. All I can say is that, from side of GCTC and from my own behalf, from my behalf of my family, my great tribute to General Rawat and Mrs. Madhulika Rawat, who I knew very little. But whatever little I knew, I thought that she really was as they say, there is a woman behind every successful man. And I think she was a live example and she gave him company right till the grave. So that is a very, very, very big thing to say for any husband and wife. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I am really, really very sad to see him go. Thank you.
Definitely, sir, you are correct on your part. I mean, everyone is actually sad. Uh, Second, I would say we have amongst us Gaurav Sawant, who also has closely worked with both Brigadier Leader and General Rawat and his family. So it would be great to have your opinion, what's your views. So we will be happy to hear from you, Gaurav. Over to you, Gaurav, please. Gaurav, kindly unmute your mic, please. Yeah.
Aditya, thank you very much, and it indeed is an honor for me to speak about General Bipin Rawat, about Brigadier Leader and the officers, and Mrs. Rawat, who were all on board that helicopter. It's a privilege to be in the company in this very august company. Air Marshal Chopra, Admiral Shekhar Sinha, General Dua. I've interacted with all of you and learned so much from all of you over the past decades. I've had the privilege of benefiting from your knowledge. So to be able to speak when all of you are there, for me, I've interacted with General Rawat as a journalist and even earlier. In fact, so his father, General Lachman Singh Rawat, was my father's instructor at the Indian Military Academy. So, and when he became chief, this is something that we talked about, and it instantly was something that he said, "Yeah, you come from our stock, and our parents go back so many decades." And my father was in touch both with General Lachman Singh Rawat, who incidentally stayed in our neighborhood, and also with General Rawat. We have a small Shaheed Smarak in the suburbs, and as Army Chief, as CDS, General Rawat would come there to the Shaheed Smarak, and my parents would be there doing the commentary, and they would always interact. As chief, he made it a point. Armed forces keep talking about media, to use media. He didn't want to use the media. He wanted to give out that information so that the nation at large would know what the taxpayers, armed forces, or at that time the army was doing. And that is something that I really appreciated about him. It wasn't a use and throw, as sometimes journalists have this thing that army or armed forces give us access when they want and not when we want. In his case, it was always an interaction, whether it was convenient with him or something that he thought was inconvenient. He would still interact with you. Now, often he would say, "Okay, I cannot say this on record right now, but this is the correct picture," and then leave it to your discretion what you'd like to say, uh, you perhaps widen your horizon or have a better perspective. And I've had that privilege, with Admiral Sinha, with Air Marshal Chopra. I don't know anything about flying, but what does it take to be, a Sea Harrier pilot or a Mirage pilot? Or what does it take, for example, to command 15 Corps? I went and interacted with General Dua at the height of counter-terror operations after a terrorist, like Burhan Wani was killed, and he was commanding the corps there. Um, so it's just the access, it's just the information flow. And with if I come back to General Rawat's issue, he would give you that access, he would give you that information. And this is not just about me; it's about any journalist, who wanted information would have access to him, would get that information, whether he came on record to give you an interview or not. At least he would share that information with you. A small aside before I talk more about General Rawat. Brigadier Lidder was a defense attaché at Astana, at Kazakhstan. And for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi was there, he was a DA. I'd gone to Astana to cover it. He would take time out again to brief you. While we interacted with the ambassador, we interacted with other officials, had the, with Brigadier Leader or then Colonel Leader, he would explain the nuances of what was going on, of why that meeting is extremely significant. And when he came as MA to CDS, So it was in his office. We would all go and sit while waiting to meet the CDS. And again, it is explaining nuances of any situation. If I may, when this very tricky issue, and that was a GCTC interview with General Bipin Rawat, which became very controversial, which was talked about very extensively about integration. And when I interviewed him, I called him up and I said, these are some of the, he says, don't worry, whatever questions you have, ask me those questions. He never wanted to know questions beforehand. He never wanted to rehearse answers beforehand. He knew what he had to say. And he just explained his perspective, why he wanted to go ahead with it. There were some decisions that he took, which youngsters in the armed forces or some in the armed forces found extremely controversial. But his point was, what is our ultimate aim? Our ultimate aim is a stronger India. He believed in that in that thought. We again not on record but off record, whether it was the in India Myanmar along the border, the situation, the cross border raid that had taken place, or Doklam, some things which he said, okay, this is what we are doing, but you cannot write about it. This is what we are doing, you can write about it. He would explain the bigger picture to you. I was there on ground when the standoff and tension was happening. So we were seeing our field guns go up. In Sikkim, you could see your guns going up. We were filming that, and that was a message that he wanted. That message sent across that we are not buckling under pressure. We are not scared. We are going ahead, and we will do what it takes to protect our nation. That message was as important to be sent across as it was to be sent to our own country. Similarly, I got clearance to go all the way up to Daulat Beg Oldi at the height of the India-China standoff post Galwan in eastern Ladakh. Again, it was to send across a message that we all the way up to Daulat Beg Oldie, I anchored a special show out of that advanced landing ground to be able to give out that story. How were we on road construction, bridge construction? And he said, वो पुराने जमाने का thought है कि हमारे 70 ton के bridge है कि narrow road है कि wide road है. He said, let everyone know this is what we're doing. It's the taxpayers' money. The taxpayer must know how that money is being spent by our country. One more small aspect, if you permit, on Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense. While we talk a lot about Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense, he wanted to ensure it happens. And a colleague of mine at Ajtak was the first to do that story about how he got IIT boys to sit with Indian Air Force personnel and Indian Army personnel, put their heads together to be able to come up with drones. Whether we're able to come up with drones that are as good or better, only time will tell. But at least we are moving forward in the right direction, is what he told us. Again, on integration, all of you know so much more than I. I look forward to benefiting from your knowledge. But one more aspect that really makes me respect not just the armed forces but armed forces families is how everyone stands by each other in this grief, in this loss. We were watching on television. I was anchoring on Aaj Tak, where we saw Mrs. Liddar support General Rawat's daughters at a time when her own grief was immense. And I actually, we my co-anchor and I, we were choking up while anchoring and reporting that aspect that she had her grief, and yet she was standing with General Rawat's family, and similarly General Rawat's family, daughters, his daughters, Mrs. Liddar were all at Colonel Harjinder's house with that family. It just goes on to show that the forces are strong, but the force behind the forces is what makes our families and our forces so strong. So it's indeed a privilege to be here at this August gathering to be able to talk about our armed forces and remember General Rawat and his team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gaurav. It was really honestly a great tribute. Uh, well, we have amongst us many other great dignitaries. Welcome, General Raj Shukla. Welcome, General. Welcome, General Dua. Um, I would also take a few minutes, maybe General Dua and Air Marshal Chopra. You can also briefly tell us about and your experiences. Then automatically we can move ahead to other session. Warm welcome, General Kakar sir. Uh, Very warm welcome. General Dua, uh, could you please briefly tell? Yeah, please.
Uh, Thank you, Aditya. And Jai Hind, everybody. I really wish we all were meeting under happier circumstances. But since we are here now on this a very solemn note, I will not take too much time, but I just want to say that for me, it's also a great personal loss. Both General Rawat and Madhu Rawat were good friends of mine. And I choose my words with care. I was on a separate wicket with Madhu Rawat. General Rawat and I go back a long way. In fact, just as a matter of interest, we both learned Microsoft Word. Initially, we were on DOS, and one didn't know computers very much because, and we both being from the infantry, so we both learned Microsoft Word on a 3 months diploma course, sharing one computer. You know, the two students used to use one PC, and needless to say, he was much better than I was. And so this is during the high command course, because that is the first course where uh, our thesis had to be submitted. I mean, had to be written on computer. Before that, it used to be handwritten. Uh, After that, we were posted together. I am not talking of earlier years. Our interaction has been a little sporadic. He's one batch senior, two courses senior to me in ND. He was a great football player in the academy team. Uh, we were posted to MS branch together from higher command course. One is that's the time we got to know each other better. Of course, higher command course makes friends. You make friends with everybody you were there. You do the course with. During MS branch tenure, I saw the man's integrity and his impartiality. MS Branch is generally known for that, but he was a cut above everyone and very sharp. He changed two appointments within during his tenure of MS Branch. He, Thereafter, one has, of course, always been in touch with him, and we've been posted together at a couple of places. Uh, for instance, when I was raising the division in Northeast, he was then the MGGS, and one would interact with him a lot professionally as well as personally. Uh, we all know how his command of the corps has been, whether it was to do with the strike after we lost 16 soldiers, the strike in Myanmar. I won't talk about those aspects which have been oft repeated. I'll just talk about a couple of aspects where a personal anecdotes or relations were involved, and then two or three points only about how he revolutionized things, and some of which is still unfinished, which we need to carry forward. Our very intense interaction took place uh, when he became the chief. I had recently become CISC. So as chief of IDS and as chief when he was the army chief, we worked a lot on integration. So, as everyone present here is aware, especially serving officers, service officers, whether serving or retired, are aware that the work that has been done in the last 2 3 years had fructified when the leadership announced the post of a CDS. So everyone who has been there before me or during our time chipped in a lot, and this government showed inclination that they were inclined to appoint a permanent chairman stroke a CDS. During that time, we used to have our share of differences. In fact, when he was serious, I had retired, and on one of the various times I went and met him, whether he wanted me to meet him or for other events or occasion. I remember ribbing him the first time I went to his office when he was serious, and I said, "Sir, you used to oppose many of the things that you must be doing that today. So he laughed it off, but it also, and we had this discussion to say that everyone is role playing. So when you are in a particular appointment, you actually assume that mantle, and you get into the skin of the role. And jokingly he said, yeah, now I have to stay fit for another 3 years. uh, I think General Rawat has initiated many things. I'll try and pick three of them, and much is known about that. But things that he has left his stamp on. He was all for changing things in keeping with times. When we all talk about gray zone warfare, hybrid warfare, and the fact that we are always preparing for the yesteryear wars, etc. As the army chief, he set into motion this the integrated battle group concept, which is being tested, is being tried, and is being implemented. I think that's something that the army needs to carry forward with zeal, enthusiasm, and whatever else modifications and amendments we do in that, notwithstanding. As far as the tri services integration is concerned, being the first CDS, he has left an indelible stamp. It is a very tough task to combine three services. It has been so in every country, from most advanced country, or let's say big militaries like the US, down to smaller militaries. In Australia, he's called the CDF. The CDS, the appointment is called Chief of Defense Forces. Their total forces, all three forces put together, are less than our Air Force. But uh, and when they had to shift the mandate, what was a 3 years time period was given. Eventually, it took 14 years for the CDF to actually assume that mandate and be able to integrate. What I'm trying to say, that it is a tough task that he's taken on. In many aspects, uh, his straight talking, being more blunt than frank, n- he did not sort of care for popularity. No matter whoever was his friend or family, he wouldn't care. I think all that we have been hearing a lot about General Rawat, one way or the other, over the last 5 years. But I think he was the right man,
Definitely, definitely, sir.
great man for the job. And the last thing I'd like to say is that he's also left his stamp on two big things in this integration part. One is integrated capability development, and the second is this use, or the power of information warfare, whether it is media, social media, cyber warfare. Every other aspect of it is encompassed in the information warfare. These aspects, I think he always wanted to give that a push, and I'm sure the three services will carry that forward. I think India has lost a great son in that. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Definitely, General Dua. Uh, I would request General Kakkar if you can just briefly, because you also had a great experience with General Rawat. So, briefly, if you can pitch in, please, sir. General Kakkar, sir.
Uh, Basically, I think Bipin leaves behind a legacy which very few will be able to match up to. The trust that he developed with the government, the sort of steps that he's taken, and in addition to it, the sort of in the impression that he created on the common Indian, the way you witness the reactions that are happening over the past few days actually displays that he changed the perception and the concept of the way the armed forces is looked at by the common Indian. We always had the respect that was due, but this outpouring of grief that we saw, this spontaneous outpouring of grief, conveys the message that he was one of those leaders who was respected, cherished, and possibly, given the regards as that of someone, who's risen to the top but is still humble and simple. Uh, we were there in a get together here in Lucknow when he was the chief. I came across 2, 3 lady officers in the get together who were concerned about their future as the courts had still to give a decision and the army was still to act. So I asked them, they said, we are concerned about it, but then we don't know what to do. I said, why don't you walk up and speak to Bipin? They said, he's the chief. We're just majors. I mean, why would he even want to talk to us? I said, why don't you come along? I took them there and I just told Bipin, I said, these lady officers are concerned about their future. He said, come, let me explain everything. For the next 10 to 15 minutes, he spoke to them, explained what the army was looking at, how it was going to act. And I think the message at the end of the explanation was that they were satisfied that someone of this level could come down to their level and, put in the effort to explain. This is the sort of simplicity that he had. Amongst us coursemates, there are many who've served with him. Despite being very junior in rank and he was the army commander, they were still serving in the same headquarters. They said we never felt that there was such a difference in in the sort of position of the individual versus us. It was still considered that after all, rank is aside, but the fact is that we are batchmates and we need to remain so. I think these qualities in him have endeared him to everyone. Maybe a politician, maybe the government, the top notch in the government, or even the common Indian. And I think that is something which is very rare in an individual. Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you, Janakar. Gaurav, I will come back to you and would request you if you can also share some instances, some वाकफ जो कुछ ऐसे पल जो आपने और कुछ शेयर किए हो. So if you could share a few more experiences with both General Rawat, Brigadier Leader, Madam Rawat, please.
जनरल रावत के साथ बातचीत बहुत होती थी. जनरल रावत, his aim was to share, his aim was to interact and explain. जो हम लोगों ने इंटरव्यू किया था जनरल रावत के साथ, जो बहुत वायरल भी हुआ, बहुत कंट्रोवर्शियल भी हुआ, जहां एंड जहां उन्होंने कहा कि एयरफोर्स हैज अ सपोर्ट आर्म वाली भूमिका, जीसीटीसी वाला ही वो इंटरव्यू था, जो बहुत डिबेट भी हुआ उस एक इंटरव्यू पर. तो उन्होंने कहा, मैं जो समझाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूं, कुछ लोग हो सकता है उसको किसी गलत दिशा में ले जाना चाहे, लेकिन उनका प्रयास ये था कि सभी समझे कि चाहे सेना है, वायुसेना है, नौसेना है, तीनों का लक्ष्य एक है कि भारत जो चाहता है उसको अचीव करे. और हम लोग का एक बार उनके साथ ऑफ कैमरा, लेकिन प्रिंट के लिए ऑन रिकॉर्ड हम लोगों के लिए, क्योंकि टीवी नीड्स अ टॉकिंग हेड, तो प्रिंट के लिए वो ऑन रिकॉर्ड था, हम लोग के लिए केवल इट वाज टू अंडरस्टैंड. So a large group, we were sitting in his office and trying to understand, and he took all questions, hard questions, soft questions. He didn't shy away from any question. And again, it didn't matter to him, whether you belong to a group or a B group or a C group, or whether your circulation was 100 copies or 1 million copies. He would give equal amount of attention to every journalist trying to explain his thought process. And that is also one reason, while some people were extremely critical of some of the decisions that he took, he was able to carry people along. Air Marshal Chopra can tell us better how much of it is actually transpiring into action on ground in terms of integrated commands being set up. But he had courage of conviction, as you all of you know better, and he followed a roadmap. For example, one conversation that we'd had, perhaps off the record, was 15 अगस्त को हम प्रयास करेंगे कि हमारा एयर डिफेंस कमांड पर हम आगे बढ़ जाए. अगर 15 अगस्त की डेडलाइन किसी वजह से सरकार ने नहीं मानी, तो उनकी अगली डेडलाइन ऑटोमेटिकली थी कि हम 26 जनवरी तक इसको करने का प्रयास करेंगे, या मई 2022 तक हमारा एयर डिफेंस कमांड पहला आ जाएगा. उसके बाद हम मैरिटाइम कमांड पर आगे बढ़ेंगे. हम नॉर्दर्न कमांड को अभी नहीं छेड़ेंगे, लेकिन ईस्टर्न और वेस्टर्न कमांड पर हम आगे बढ़ जाएंगे. और हमारा फॉल बैक सिस्टम क्या होगा अगर कोई इवेंचुअलिटी आ गई या वो सिस्टम नहीं काम किया, वो हमको even as journalists he would explain some of this stuff to us and then say okay this much is on record, this much is not on record, but this is for your understanding. तो ये बहुत अच्छा इंटरेक्शन था. दूसरा जो मीडिया में मालूम नहीं कितना आया कितना नहीं आया, उनका पोस्ट रिटायरमेंट गोल भी उनको अभी से पता था कि उनको उत्तराखंड में एक स्कूल खोलना है. उस स्कूल के लिए वो पैसे भी जोड़ रहे हैं और उस स्कूल में बच्चों को ट्रेनिंग देके, उत्तराखंड के बच्चों को ट्रेनिंग देकर वो उनको सेनाओं में लाना चाहते थे. तो और उन्होंने एक बार मुझे कहा था कि मैंने इस समाज से ना बहुत, मुझे इस समाज से मिला है, इस देश से मुझे बहुत मिला है. मेरे पिताजी लेफ्टिनेंट जनरल थे. आई हैव डन सो वेल. Now I want other children to get all of to benefit from this and do better. और दूसरा वो मतलब अपने आप उत्तराखंड के तो थे ही, वो असल में गोरखा ही थे. तो वो वहां के बच्चों के लिए भी बहुत ज्यादा करना चाहते थे कि उनको भी सेना में आने का, सेनाओं में आने का अवसर मिले, and they're able to achieve something and make something of their life. So all of this was quite inspiring to see that someone is trying to do so much for the society, for the betterment of our country.
Definitely, Gaurav. He actually touched everyone's heart. I mean, not only him, even Madam Rawat, उनका जो काम था रहा पूरा आर्म्ड फोर्सेस की वाइफ्स के साथ, उनके चिल्ड्रन के साथ, बच्चों को आगे वॉर विडोज के साथ, मतलब it was a very very great experience. I mean, there are many. I mean, we will be having General Rakesh Sharma and General Ghanshyam Katoj in the third half, so they will be giving. So I would request everyone to stay intact. And now I would request our session chair, General Kamaljeet Singh. Warm welcome, General KJ sir. We are now going to the second round of our session that talks about the carrying forward the legacy of CDS General Bipin Rawat. We have a keynote from General Raj Shukla. Lieutenant General Raj Shukla is a GOC in CRTREC in Army. He will be talking on the CDS General Bipin Rawat's alliance, legacy and challenges. Warm welcome, General Shukla. Next, we have our speaker, Air Marshal Anil Chopra, who is the Director General of Center for Air Power Studies, flight aviator. Then we have Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, an Executive Council member for GCTC, and former Chief of Integrated Defense Staff and former FOC&C Western Naval Command. Then we have General Satish Dua, who is also an Executive Council member for GCTC and former Chief of Integrated Defense Staff. Then we have Lieutenant General Arun Sani, former GOC&C Southwestern Command. So very warm welcome to one and all. So General KJ sir, over to you. You are on mute, sir. Kindly unmute your mic, please. Thank you. KJ sir, you are on mute. Kindly unmute your mic. And I would request others to kindly mute your mics, please. Sir. Thank you.
Jai Hind, Aditya, can you hear me?
Very well, sir. Very well.
Firstly,
very well.
I am little sorry. I was out somewhere and managed to rush back because, like I say, that there are generals and there are field marshals, but there is one Aditya who's super field marshal. He manages to make all generals run. So he rang me up today and he said, you have to do this. I had no choice. So from Sabatu, I just got back here. Now we have an interesting session about the legacy of General Bipin Rawat, and we have some very illustrious speakers with us. Actually, I feel more like a PTI of a squad or Indian cricket squad. You have a trainer. Everybody is an expert in his domain. People like General Raj Shukla, Satish Dua, Air Marshal Anil Chopra, Gaurav Samant. They're all like Tendulkar and, these kind
Admiral
of...
Shekhar Sinha.
Shekhar Sinha, and I have to somehow manage to keep them, in a session. So, okay, I'll take up this challenge. But before we launch into on this mission, let me just briefly explain something which I wrote today for Times of India regional edition in my column. See, General Rawat worked in a time with a government which is both in hurry and result oriented. Please watch this out. And this government has laid down milestones. I was there in that interaction as an army commander, where PM Modi told us that we will go in for jointness. We were there in Cochin. It was, I think, in 2016, and it was told to us. So I will repeat, this government is both in hurry and is result oriented and has given milestones. And these were given to Jal Rawat. Now, a lot of people who say that he was too close to the government. But my dear friends, when you rise at the apex, you have to be close. How can you not enjoy the trust of the government? So that is in my perception, it is a primary prerequisite to be at that level of leadership. And thank God, he enjoyed the confidence of this government. We are not Pakistani military establishment where deep state has its own agenda and some chief is running his own agenda. A lot of people have told me that he should have, said this and that. I said, listen, in India, thank God, we don't have generals who are doing chest thumping and table thumping and carrying their resignation letters in hip pockets. There are no such concept. So he worked in different difficult times. And all those who asked me, I used to tell them, have you even raised a battalion or a company or even a platoon? He was raising a setup which was conceived after Kargil, setback in Kargil of sorts. And yet we have this phenomenal and interesting Indian quality of dilution. We diluted it. Kargil Review Committee said that we should have these theater commands, we should have, all this concept was laid down, one force, one border, one force, all this is given over there. But then India has this interesting, bureaucracy and political setup. And there is this report comes, Prakash Singh committee comes, Lingdo committee comes, and then we dilute it. And then final result, nothing happens. So he was fighting that. And with due apologies to Air Marshal Chopra, sir, the toughest task is to extricate turf out of three services. We are so silo bound. I have worked as ADG PP. I know how attack helicopters were procured, how they were scaled, how Air Force and Army both have taken attack helicopters, how the UAVs are brought, how the air defense weapons are allocated. So all these tasks he was doing. He had a very tough mission with him. And he was a man who was, I wrote in one of my columns about a month and a half back that when he spoke that we should interact with, we should have, this was in Raisina dialogue about 3 years back, we should maintain channels with Taliban. What is wrong in that? We are talking now. That time he was told that this is wrong, this is MEA, people jumped. But thank God they had listened to him. Because in no case we should have lost contact with Taliban. And we are paying for it. Other time he said that in clash of civilizations, it is predicted that the Sino Wahhabi civilizations will get into a collusive mode. They will tend to get together. And what is wrong in that? China and Pakistan are together. So he was willing to put his ideas on the block, which is a vanishing trait today. So General Rawat had these fantastic qualities. To set the stage, I have just covered this, and I will request each speaker, of course, nobody can check an army commander who's in command and serving. So General Shukla, please do take whatever time you wish to take. But after that, speakers, please do respect time because we have another session to follow. So may I request, I don't have to give any introduction of General Shukla. He's a scholar warrior. He's today RTRAC Army Commander. He has commanded the 10 Corps, which is a test bed kind of a corps for cyber, for information, for convergence. All these technologies in our army are inducted through 10 Corps. So, Sir Chopra, sir, you want to say something?
Yeah, I had requested Aditya that I have got
Okay,
an
sir.
engagement
Please.
with the permission of the general. If you will
Jan
allow
Shukla,
me
sir,
to,
will you allow?
Please,
yeah,
sir, please.
with
Because I know Jan Shukla, he is very large-hearted.
yeah,
Sir, please.
with the
Yes.
permission of both the generals, thank you,
नहीं,
and it's a very
और
solemn.
हम सब सिनेटी में सब आपके पीछे हैं सर, तो आप you can take on, sir.
No. Yeah. So indeed, I'm not going to get into the questions that the general has just asked me to speak about, about theater command, air defense, etc. It's a serious question. I have been interacting with the general. It's indeed a very sad week for India and particularly for Indian armed forces. General Rawat was still so young, just a little over 63, and of course, with his very loving wife of over 40 years, and then they just went together along with the 11 other gallant officers and other ranks in that ghastly helicopter, accident. Professionally and personally, the general will be remembered for many things. And I, as the head of the Indian Air Force think tanks, Center for Air Power Studies, I did interact with him personally, one-to-one, trying to see how we can smoothen out some of the things. But before that, I briefly want to mention that I became knew him first time, as a daring infantry officer who led from the front. We all know he is the son of a lieutenant general and ex-NDA, sword of honor. I am and one of the very, very highly decorated officers. And that's the time I sort of, first tried to understand him. My first contact with him was only after I heard about this Dimapur 3 Corps, strike, surgical strike across into Myanmar. And then, of course, thereafter, when he was the vice chief, Uri, the strikes that we did surgical into LOC, and then of course, I was so impressed with this Doklam standoff because it required guts. It was nearly over 3 months of standoff, and for the Indian troops to move armed with weapons, with bulldozers into Sikkim and to challenge the Chinese. I thought that was a very, very big signal. Another occasion where I was a big fan and I supported his case on Twitter, even though I had to have a war with an army general on Twitter. That was on Major Litul Gogoi's case, because I strongly felt that young people who take initiative out of box solutions, and I really liked when he was given Chief of Army Staff's commendation. And, of course, General was the Army Chief when the Balakot strikes went through, and we all know, how this whole exercise happened. More recently, we have seen him in the Eastern Ladakh, and as CDS, as head of the family, he was supporting the armed forces, operational guidance, coordination, interfacing with the government for military advice, procurements. Great, and another thing I liked about him, he never missed his words. He spoke openly when it came to China, Pakistan. He was the guy who was most vocal. In fact, the media was so much more happier with him than the service chiefs, mainly because he was perhaps in a position to call a spade a spade. So I think that is another thing I really liked, and what a legacy that he is going to leave behind. It's a pushing integration of the three services. Yes, there were differences, there were challenges, there were complexities, but each service has its idiosyncrasies, and there are genuine concerns, but he all the time was pushing along, trying to iron out those issues. And I'm telling you, notwithstanding what he spoke in the public domain, a lot of work was going on at the back. And the second thing I really liked about him was when he was pushing very strongly, supporting the Atmanirbharta, indigenization. Undoubtedly, India has to be self-sufficient in defense production, cannot carry on importing forever. And, the kind of outpouring, the national outpouring, led by the president, the prime minister, the kind of send-off that he was given, and the kind of reaction we saw on social media, I think he was a person who is loved across the country. And unfortunately, Mi-17 V5, great helicopter, VVIP, rugged helicopter, workhorse of the Indian Air Force, from Siachen to DBO to Northeast. and the person flying was the commanding officer of the unit, and a very high level court of inquiry has been now ordered, and we hope that something will come out of this whole thing. And for any soldier, the respect and honorable send-off is the most important. It's a way of honoring his or her sacrifice. And that's why each country builds memorials to pay homage to the soldiers. Remember, the nation's flag flutters not so much with the wind as much the breath of each soldier. And the ceremonies were solemn. India was proud of the way the general's two daughters showed composure and remained steadfast despite the grief. The same was true of Mrs. Lidder, wife of Brigadier Lidder, and his daughter, and all the other ladies who lost their life, heroes and loved ones, and our women and children like a rock. I was also touched to hear after the immersing of generals' ashes in Ganga in Hardwar that they'll also be immersed in by the family members and the friends in the 5 different rivers confluences in Uttarakhand known as the Panch Prayas. We also pray for General Liaison Officer, Group Captain Varun Singh, the sole survivor who's still struggling for his life. And let me finish my tribute by narrating the part of the famous poem by Jagdamba Prasad Mishra. शहीदों की चिताओं पर लगेंगे हर बरस मेले, वतन पर मरने वालों का यही बाकी निशान होगा. Salute to all the departed. Salute to the great general who will find a golden place in Indian history. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Air Marshal Chopra sir. What a wonderful tribute, and how nicely you have put it across. I am also inspired to become a little poetic on this occasion. In one of these occasions, I also heard from somebody, वो धरती ही बांझ हो जाएगी जहां वीर ना पूजे जाएंगे, शहीदों की चिताओं पे चढ़ने वाले फूल ही केवल शाहगुल कहलाएंगे. So that is the kind of sentiment which in India it has been reflected. There are implied messages in this. I hope our politico bureaucratic class picks it up. The kind of love the common people have displayed. See, this Veera Vanakkam has taken place at the same place where IPKF was shown diffidence. Same Tamil Nadu. Everything is changed. So thank God India has changed to this sort of formulation. Nilgiris have shown such love. So now with Aditya, with your permission, I am sure the army commander has a lot of engagements. So let us request him to please make his keynote address and educate us, because he's seen it up front and he's sat on the same table and discussed various issues with him. So over to General Raj Shukla sir. I have already introduced him. He's a scholar warrior in our armed forces. He's been the commandant of Army War College. He's commanded the Higher Command Wing. He is commanded 10 Corps, which is the Test Bed Corps, and currently he is heading the RTREC. So over to you, sir. And he's from artillery.
Friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'll speak from a few jottings that I have made, merely to bring discipline to what I have to say. So allow me first and foremost to personally condole the extremely sad demise of General Rawat, Mrs. Madhulika Rawat, Brigadier Lidder, Lieutenant Colonel Harjinder Singh, who was on my staff when I was at Headquarter 10 Corps. I worked with him personally, and I can tell you he was an extremely diligent soul. And 9 of our gallant soldiers and airmen who passed away in that tragic crash on the 8th of December. We saw the spontaneous outpouring of grief in consequence. We saw how the nation was dumbstruck, and we also seen how the nation was deeply wounded by that loss. Let me also add that while I have had the privilege of working with General Rawat in various capacities, I was his DG Prospective Planning. I was in the committee with him when the CDS was set up. I was the Commandant War College, where he came very often to attend seminars. And I've seen him as a man who respected learning. He would just not come as the chief, deliver the address, keynote, and walk away. which was the fashion. He would sit from 8 to 8, listen to every view, hear every perspective, share his insights. And somebody was recounting, he would encourage everyone to speak, from second lieutenant to general. And while the public image of his is, of being very forceful, let me tell you, he was one of the greatest listeners that I have seen. So while I've worked with him in various capacities and appointments, and of course, Army Commanders Conferences, all these discussions about theaterization, this, that, and the other, women induction, I have not served on his personal staff. So my perspective is more professional than personal. I have not sat on the same computer as General Dua did, as General Harsh Kakkar did. And, I didn't have that personal, shall I say, connect with him, but a professional interaction. This may also help to add greater objectivity to what I say. So as we reflect on General Rawat's life and his times, I see a very strong connect between his persona and his professional accomplishments, between his personal attributes and his very substantive contributions to national security. So I think that's a good linkage. I shall in the 10 to 15 minutes given to me, firstly talk about some of his standout attributes in his personality, in his persona, the way he dealt with challenges, the way he dealt with life. And from those, I shall try and identify what I call 5 to 6 of his seminal contributions to the Indian Army, to the Indian Armed Forces, to national defense, and to national security. So first, what were those standout attributes in his persona that to me appear particularly salient? And they were so unique to Bipin Rawat, the man. Well, in my view, there are 4. First was that he had a pretty forceful demeanor. But this demeanor somehow concealed the other aspects of his personality, which was that he was, as I think Gaurav was recounting, he was open to any opinion, to any shade of thought. And it was only after listening a great deal in that good old army tradition of when you arrive at a decision after perhaps days of ideation, he would implement it forcefully. He was not afraid to speak his mind. He had clarity and clairvoyance, the ability to separate the woods from the trees, to arrive at the nub of the problem, at the nub of the issue, which is a very rare attribute. And of course, his courage of conviction. That was 1. 2, his great honesty, and honesty in every sense. His personal honesty, his financial honesty, his integrity, honesty of purpose, which he leveraged, in my view, very strategically to push reform. Because since he had that very honest stature, he could do this. And many of us who have failed to do this is because of some of the deficits in this particular domain. There is a lesson for all the younger officers to honesty as a strategic advantage, to leverage it in pursuit of organizational interest. And 3, he abhorred the status quo. He was one of those rare army officers in an organization which is known to be conservative, this happy family kind of stuff. As General KJ was accounting, give helicopters to everybody, drones to everybody, annoy nobody. He was certainly not in that. Did not come from that body of thought. He abhorred the status quo. He was an ardent advocate and orchestrator of change. Not only advocate, but an orchestrator of change. And he helped shake the Indian Army out of its stupor and take it out, in many ways, take it out of its time wrap. And that is a fact. The Indian Army was stuck in not changing. And he did that and was also attempting to do it with the larger Indian armed forces. He also, and I think General KJ alluded to this, he had a certain military savvy that helped him to navigate the very complex politico-strategic pathways very assiduously, with great skill. Now, this is once again a rare quality, a rare attribute of generalship. Very often, we mistake principles and siddhant to be always in conflict with the political establishment of the day. That is not always productive and purposeful, which is very different from telling your political bosses in the privacy of the office as to what should be done or should not be done. And this was a quality which I have seen at close quarters. I thought it was a very fine quality, but which sometimes got misunderstood. So these, character traits stood him in good stead when he was tasked to transform the strategic military landscape, as General KJ told us, as an actor, as an enabler, and as a transformer. And what were these transformations that he contributed in various ways? Act as a primary actor, sometimes as an enabler, sometimes as a transformer. In my view, there are 3 to 4 things. One is that he helped create or inject into the Indian Armed Forces a new normal in our strategic outlook. Even before he became chief, as chief and beyond, he, along with several other players, and I'm not saying that he was a solo player, but he played a large role in contributing by through various means, as I said, in the development of a new normal in the Indian Army strategic outlook, a release somewhat, a modification somewhat of a defensive crouch. Now, this is very, very significant because it entails a large body of things, sowing the seeds of the thought, developing forces, developing that outlook, equipping them and executing them. And we saw this in the many offensive land and airstrikes and actions in Doklam, in J&K, in the Northeast, in Balakot, and in Galwan. All this in the development of this new normal in our strategic outlook, General Rawat played a key role. It also helped the Indian state, and that is also extremely important. It needs to be articulated. Helped the Indian state craft a wider bouquet of options in its response to terrorism and expansionism. Now, this is sometimes not understood, and he had a very key role. It has, in consequence, sent out some very strong politico-military signals to our adversaries. Nobody knows it better than them. It has led to modification of adversary competitors' behaviors and has seen the Indian state, after some years of pusillanimity, to punch above, or at least up to its strategic weight, and at least not below it. Now, that is extremely significant. For years, we saw the Indian state punching below its strategic weight. If we do this, that will happen. Endless gaming. Somebody would say that the army chief, what role did he have in the Balakot airstrikes? Well, merely by assuring the political establishment that if there is a response, the Indian army is prepared to take on that response. And these were, this I think was a very seminal contribution. The second transformatory metric was the operationalization of the CDS-DMA. Now, I saw in that committee, he had some role in creating the CDS-DMA and thereafter in operationalizing it. And what has this done? This has done something very significant. It has seen a dramatic upturn, a maturing of India's CMR paradigm, the civil-military relationship, which was, in my view, stuck in adolescence, and it was under General Rawat's tutelage that it grew to adulthood. It is extremely significant because it gave the Indian Armed Forces a robust say and voice in strategic military affairs. And a voice which was once squeaky became resonant. And it gave the Indian Armed Forces the confidence to speak about their own doctrines, to articulate their views on issues on military diplomacy, and this whole gamut of strategic military affairs. Something which is not easily understood, but it is a huge turn. And we've seen the era before, when the Indian Armed Forces were, shall I say, out of that CMR paradigm. And it was a great change which he helped put into place. Sometimes we do not realize what a powerful tool it is in the CMR paradigm. The CDS-DMA, in which he had a very great role, he may not have fashioned it entirely. There were other players in the larger, wider government who did it. But in consequence, today, the Indian Armed Forces have a tool which, if you study carefully, is more powerful than Barry Goldwater Nichols. I think the most powerful instrument in any military ever for transformation. So all that we have begun to see in the field of jointness in consequence, and not without obstacles. Theatre commands, which I have no doubt will be realized. Jointness in training pedagogy, doctrines, this whole thought process which is becoming joint may not have been possible without the CDS-DMA and General Bipin Rawat. Both the edifice, which was provided by General Rawat and the government, and also by General Rawat, because he was the creator. As the first CDS, he set it into motion. And if the Indian Armed Forces, transform into that truly joint, integrated combat machine, one that is joint in body, mind, and soul, I think the credit largely will go to the initiatory steps taken by General Rawat. The third transformatory metric, and this is sometimes also doesn't get the public attention that it does, is that he brought about a technological renaissance in the Indian Army. And I'm not exaggerating, I mean it. It was a technological renaissance, and the zing that he brought to Atmanirbharta. Zing, I mean the slang for energy, enthusiasm, and innovation. You ask startups today, you ask much of the private sector, and you will get this feel. And why I say, because the Indian Army, in comparison to the other two services, was somewhat of a technology laggard. It is no longer so. In many domains, in all humility, may I say that we are leading this technological transformation. And much of this credit goes to General Rawat and others, General Shah, General Chanan, so many others. But it is truly remarkable, because I know thus far, in my younger days, we were told that our job is to fight. The technology will be brought to us by somebody else. Under his stewardship, the Indian Army began to own technology initiatives. So a very good example is drone swarming. We swarmed the drones in Army Day, on I think the last Army Day, and within 10 months, an order has been placed for 200 crores. Look at the scale, look at the time, and was it even, could it have been conceptualized 10 years back? Certainly not. And it is, initiatives like these which carry the stamp of General Bipin Rawat. He brought new energy and enthusiasm to the ADB, the Army Design Bureau. He created new pathways. An army which believed that we only fight, technology is not our business, started putting out these problem statements, started telling the world what technology we need. We worked close to the world. We opened up our ranges, we opened up our laboratories, our outreach to IITs, IIMs, regional engineering colleges, this whole business of civil-military fusion that is sweeping the strategic military landscape today was in many ways initiated by General Rawat. He has, in a great measure, fired up the defense startup circuit. The defense startup circuit today, you beat these youngsters, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds. This gentleman who, by his sheer dint of his diligence and his talent, has got 100 crores. I mean, I don't grudge him his 100 crores. He deserves each penny. But would that have been possible any time in the past? General Rawat. Today, the Indian Army has got an AI lab going, a quantum lab going, 5G. I just recall it was, I think, 4 or 5 days before his demise when we were talking of how 5G needs to be brought in. And he said, what are you doing with making a test bed in MCT? Get it to one of the armored formations in the Western Front. That was the way he spoke. He was telling me, why is no member from the armed forces in the 6G committee which has been set up? And immediately we took that matter up with our chief, and now we're getting somebody in that. That was his whole approach to technology. He used to talk about deploying a military IoT along the northern borders. The first time he told me that, I smiled. I mean, it was such a dreamy thought. And a whole lot of, he would spend hours and hours going, in these technology seminars, each of these stalls, the energy, the patience that he had, listening to each innovator, a youngster, a startup kid, an entrepreneur, the time he spent with these, established corporate houses, telling them how private sector was so central to defense. I've seen all of this in close quarters. And all the initiatives that we have taken in robotics, exoskeletons, autonomous platforms, the Indian Army in the emergency powers, I think has placed an order of about 17,000 crores. 4,500 crores have gone to military startups. 4,500. General Rawat. I told you about drone swarming. This whole flip to our Atmanirbharta. He took Atmanirbharta beyond sloganeering. He took Atmanirbharta towards delivery. That is, Atmanirbharta has always been a slogan in India. Its delivery started over 4 to 5, 6 years. And for all this, of course, the wider government, the Prime Minister, the Honorable Raksha Mantri, the three chiefs, and many other players, General Chanan, General Saha, so many colonels, everybody gets credit. But a large portion of that, that drive came from the persona of General Rawat. So from assault rifles to the Arjun tank to the LCA, he was a very ardent advocate of the thought that, listen, you have to accept imperfect acquisitions. You cannot have these platforms which function miraculously from minus 30 to plus 70. It just cannot happen. And when you get indigenous platforms in, they will be imperfect. So orders, he used to say orders must be placed. He enabled the Indian Armed Forces, at least the Indian Army, to take its gaze beyond the DPSUs and DRDO. He was instrumental in developing a new connect with centers of learning and centers of wealth creation. That is extremely important. His outreach to academia. He set a personal example by going and addressing a university in Uttarakhand, a university in Pondicherry, a university in UP. He removed this, this nobility in academia. I mean, talent from anywhere, regional engineering colleges, of course, IITs, the IIMs. And I think, put it metaphorically, he helped fuse Durga with Saraswati and Lakshmi. Instrument of power with the instrument of learning and the instrument of wealth. I mean, centers of wealth creation, the traditional corporates which will bring their own expertise to defense in the pursuit of our national security interests and in the creation of this new and powerful India, Naya Sudhrid or Surakshit Bharat. Once again, General Rawat's creations. His other major contribution, and I think Gaurav would identify was this, was in the world of information leveraging and narrative building. General Joshi first spoke of the media as a force multiplier. General Sundarji, of course, was somebody who was very media savvy. But after them, I don't know, General KJ will correct me subsequently, there was one chief who understood the media, outreach to them. It was General Rawat. He took the Indian Army from media shy to media savvy. I told you he was a keen participant in ideation of every kind. I gave you the example from the Army War College. He engaged himself. I think just 3-4 days back, I was hearing Shreya Dondial saying how he had promised her in an interview on, jointmanship and so on and so forth. And he engaged honestly with the media. Sometimes, I would say, with lack of discretion, which got him much of his infamy. But he was unafraid to engage with the media. And the other very different thing from him, from other senior military officers, was that he did not discourage people lower down the chain from engaging with the media. I have not seen him rebuke anybody that why did you say this, why did you not say that, even when things go wrong. And if the Indian Army has been media shy, it is because of this hesitancy comes from the fact that why should I engage? Because, if I say something which is out of line, one will get to hear this. He never did that. He consciously avoided that. And in sum, much of it was discreet, much of it was not on the table. It has enabled the Indian Armed Forces to establish a psychological lead over our adversaries and competitors in many ways. So that is, I think, the other seminal contribution of General Rawat. He helped fashion a new narrative for the military and the Indian state. And here there are three significant things which come to my mind. The narrative about the military was that, listen, and here is not a military which is, status quo, which will not change, but a military which is modern, which is going to embrace change. It will be technologically enabled. It will be futuristic. It will be precise. It will be intellectually chiseled. And of course, it will be strong. It will be robust. It will deliver on the ground in the tactical operational domains. He was also a vehicle or a means for a change in our statecraft. After many years, we saw the Indian state working, or an Indian state governmental apparatus that knew how to weave the instrument of force deftly into its statecraft. Again, a very significant contribution, not often understood. And this is a major change which our adversaries and competitors abroad are observing. They know how this change is occurring. And three was this public outpouring, and it was spontaneous outpouring of grief. And we were always told that, listen, the Indian public is indifferent to defense. It doesn't figure very high on its radar. How wrong? Just like the Indian public is very politically savvy, it is very strategically savvy. It perhaps saw the honesty of purpose, the very good work being done by this man. How else do you explain these spontaneous crowds that came to say goodbye? So the Indian armed forces have always been held in high esteem. They've always been respected, but we saw this street affection, this love on the streets. I think that change I have not seen in my military career. That change too can be attributed to General Rawat. And lastly, since he was fearless and he had this great personal honesty, he was unafraid to cleanse the organization of sloth, inefficiencies, dated practices, even financial and administrative infringements. Now tell me what is wrong in that. And here I think he was the most misunderstood. Much of what Gaurav was saying, the banging that he got was for these issues. And which leader should not correct things which are going wrong. So all the initiatives for right sizing, he saw the changes in the character of war. He launched this Mohim for gray zone competencies. I've seen this. Reimagining operational structures like the IBGs, so on and so forth. And because he chose to meddle with the comfortable status quo, he invited controversy, sometimes infamy. But let me tell you, even in his unpopular decisions, he was always open to conversations, always open to rethink. And therefore, many of his initiatives, which grew adverse publicities, were subsequently reversed. He had the magnanimity to do that. That is also a great quality. He was willing to retrace his steps. So in terms of his legacy, I think in the evolutionary journey, when the Indian armed forces needed change and transformation the most, we were most fortunate to be helmed by a consummate performer, somebody who reveled as much in ideation as in execution, and somebody who was a believer in change. So when the Indian armed forces needed transformation the most, they got, in recent times, I think, the most brilliant transformer. In his life, he was unafraid, fearless, he was a doer, he was an accelerator. And I think his dream was to take the Indian Army and the armed forces to a new high in terms of our strategic worldviews, in terms of our operational efficiencies, so on and so forth. So that will be his legacy. Very briefly, last minute or so, how do we carry forward his legacy? Well, I think many of the reforms that he initiated are now irreversible. That's his seminal contribution. Jointmanship may take various forms, and I quite respect the contrarian views. So we must engage with them, we must debate with them, but jointmanship is now on a roll. Jointmanship cannot be reversed. That, I think, is his seminal contribution. We would do him great service, do the Indian nation great service, if we were to impart further energy and momentum to his reforms. That will require a lot of diligence and resolve. Given the accumulating strategic adversity around us, we have no choice but to hasten the pace and enlarge the scale of Bipin Rawat's reforms. In terms of jointmanship, just one domain I'll tell you, we have just taken the first baby steps. We have to have far greater interoperability, integration, then cross-pollination, which means, say, in the Ministry of Defense, there should be service officers, bureaucrats, scientists, men from the media, the corporate world, everybody coming together. And of late, I had heard General Rawat speak of civil-military fusion, which is basically talent from any quarter, civil or military, attribute from any quarter, civil or military, getting the academia, the corporate world, DPSUs, the startups, entrepreneurs, every mind, every thought, every talent together in pursuit of our national security goals. Because national security is so complex that we must have the humility to acknowledge that nobody can do it on its own, certainly not the armed forces. And I heard General Rawat speak in many of his talks about civil-military fusion. So that's the direction jointmanship is to go. He is to constantly talk about, moving from processes to outcomes, from ideation to delivery, from developing a uniquely Indian doctrine, from intensifying our technology embrace, in arms moving from importer to exporter. So the whole lot of things which he has talked about in his many addresses, conferences, conversations, we owe it to him. Owe it to his legacy, owe it to all that he did to take it forward. And in the ultimate analysis, if we can create the Indian armed forces in the mold of this calibrated combat machine, one which is precise, calibrated, truly joined, technologically enabled, a combat machine of the 21st century, if we can do that, which is not going to be an easy task by any means, I think nothing would please General Rawat no more. And only then will his noble soul rest in peace. So this is my tribute to the life, vision, work, and the profound contributions of General Bipin Rawat.
Sir, you're on mute. Kindly unmute you. General Shukla.
Babu, mute ho gaya kya?
Yeah. Now
You just missed the last sentence. That's all. Just the last sentence.
This was just my tribute to his life, vision, work, to his profound contributions to Indian defense and national security. As I said, to a soldier and a true Karm Yogi, we bow our heads in reverence, also in fond remembrance. Shat Naman. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Army Commander, sir. You have put it together in such a wonderful way, brought out the fusion that he was attempting between civil and military, and in the domains of Shakti, getting Lakshmi, Saraswati, and Durga together. Such wonderful concepts and summation of what he was doing. A very tough task. Only thing you had asked me to discuss about the media thing. Well, he had done PhD in media interaction or media management, whatever way it is said, I think from the Meerut University. So he knew the import of media. Only one thing, once I told General Rawat that there is a lot of talk because, on Twitter, a lot of people used to do name calling and all, and I used to get into clashes with them. So he said, General KJ, in your articles, you don't spare me. I said, but they are issue-based. We are agreeing and disagreeing on certain aspects. I don't carry the responsibility of being the CDS. I'm an armchair, so-called pretending to be a thinker. So I can give you ideas. You may rule them out because you know the best. But nobody should bring the syntax of dialogue solo. So that's what I used to tell him. And I was telling him, how about doing some image building? So he said, I will never do it. I will never do any image building because even the PM has told me that aap karte rahiye aur inki parwah mat kariye. Because in PM office, everything is monitored so much. So here was a man who was raising the level of media articulation. Like I said, he was willing to put his ideas on the block. Who will do it in today's age? He was not saying no comments and all. He was sort of opening up media interaction and all these issues. Yet he was not doing personal image building. See, he did not waste any resource on person. He could have also gone smiling around, tried to be. I have seen him in an interaction where a very senior officer told him that you have reduced this foreign liquor. So he said, "Sir, I get an X amount of money to run the canteens, and I have to buy a lot of things. And sir, this is not my priority to get foreign liquor." So when that senior officer persisted, he said, "Sir, you belong to 0.1% of armed forces. 99%, which is Javans, is thrilled with whatever whiskey they are getting. Those brands I'm getting them, and they are thrilled with it." So he was a person who was with, and this talk, a lot of people in J&K say that he was very ruthless. Hardly. On higher command course, I remember he was, I'm from Armored Corps, and he came from, he was from infantry. So we used to have a lot of people like Satish Dua, like Chavan, like Thodge, who's passed away, my good friend. So they were all doing higher command with us. So we used to learn from them, and they used to learn from us on mechanized warfare. Jal Rawat used to always tell us, as Colonel Rawat, that it is not the terror groups, it's not the tanzeems, it's not the leaders of those groups, it is the common people of Kashmir who are the center of gravity. He was always a people's man. He always identified that. Later, when I was to raise Sikkim Scout, there was a problem. Like in Sikkim, what happens in the dialogue is today hijacked by Nepalese origin people who are largely Gurkhas, and those people are running all vocations. You've seen Chief Ministers Pawan Changling, Nar Bahadur Bhandari, Gole, all are of Nepalese origin. So the original inhabitants, Bhutias and Lepchas, have been left behind. So as 33 Corps Commander, he was MGGS in Eastern Command, and he's from Gurkhas. I told him, "Bipin, you'll feel bad, but I am going to focus on getting Bhutias and Lepchas into Sikkim Scouts, because they also need the place." So he said, "Sir, that is the right way." And we ran camps, we ran motivation exercises to get them, and we got some of them there. So he was a people's man. Now my charter is to call upon Jal Satish Dua, who's a very popular TV commentator. I'm sure there is some program lined up for him. Jal Dua, are you there? No, I don't see Jal Dua responding. Is Admiral Sinha sir there?
I am here, sir. I am.
Okay, okay. So
how?
the Marshal of Higher Command Course, Jal Satish Dua, who's very close to Jal Rawat, and like I was saying, he's a much sought after TV commentator. So I'm sure there's a program lined up for him. Just to introduce him briefly, he is been a front man, a personal winner of Gallantry Award. He has commanded formation in the Northeast, IJR East. He's also commanded the famed 15 Corps, and he also headed the IDS. He had that onerous responsibility. And today, he's donning the role of a commentator and scholar warrior, writes some wonderful articles. So over to you, Satish Dua, sir. Please take, for what time, say about Aditya, 8 to 10 minutes or 5?
5.
So please, yeah.
5. I am okay with 5, and I'll tell you why.
You have spoken earlier also. Yeah.
Sir, thank you very much. And if you, whatever good words you used about me, I am only trying to follow you and your line. Thank you very much for mentoring us all along, Higher Command Course onwards. And General Shukla and I have been colleagues when I was Corps Commander in Kashmir, J&K, I beg your pardon, Kashmir. But I have this complaint against him, that he's covered up the entire topic so beautifully that he's left nothing for people like me to speak.
So kind of you. So kind of you.
No, thank you. I only bask in your glory when I say that we were colleagues together, but I take pride in what you did.
You're my
Thank you.
boss.
And that's kind of you to say. Thank you very much. But as an optimist, I look at it this way, that he's also made our job easier. But thank you, Raj, for putting out things so succinctly in your, as always, I mean, in your inimitable style. You made our job easier. And that is why, KJ sir, I said 5 minutes is enough. I think, and since I have already spoken about his the personal aspects in the beginning, but I will talk about a couple of personal traits because they have a bearing with what we just heard and we're going to talk about. I think he could combine tough talking and a kind heart. It might seem a little paradoxical, but all of us know because the audience or the participants in this are not strangers to what the topic we're talking about, whether it's the personality. Some may have interacted closely, or some may not have interacted closely, but some have interacted professionally or have been affected by the professional circle. He was very sharp. I know General Shukla brought all this out, but I'm just trying to bring out something. He was very sharp, and he had a repository of anecdotes. When you spoke to him on anything, he would pull out some anecdotes. I mean, I admired his sharp memory. For instance, one day he was talking to me on some issue, and we were talking about Bhutan and this. He said one day once he was having a conversation with the king of Bhutan, and he told him, if I have my facts, if I remember them correctly, he said, then when he told him, sir, you and I were class fellows once. And I was surprised what he's talking. I believe his father was posted in Bhutan at a certain stage in the younger days. He says, I used to always sit behind you and things like that. What I'm trying to suddenly bring out by that is that whether it was some professional field, he was, of course, with his military upbringing that he had as a child and as in the profession, for every situation, for every region, for every different situation, he would be able to pull out some of his personal experience, and that really shows the depth of the variety of his service. He was candid, blunt, as any strong personality would be. He was candid to the point of being blunt. We all know that. We've heard that. We've experienced that. Any personality making great changes is bound to be controversial. Then Raj Shukla brought out several of such topics one by one. So I'm not going to repeat things that he has said. I would have said some of those in much lesser words. He put it in such better words that he was there at the helm for 5 years. When I say 5 years, we're talking about 3 years as army chief and thereafter 2 years as the CDS. He's taken he had an uncanny knack of taking bold step at highest levels. I will not recount. Everyone knows, and what General Shukla actually brought out very, chronologically, the big steps, whether it is the starting off as a corps commander from the surgical strike in Myanmar after we lost 16 men, or it was when he became the chief thereafter, his steps in Doklam, his preparing the army for Balakot airstrikes in case of any response. Galwan, as General Shukla brought out. So those and many more were the bold step at highest levels in the new normal, as he brought out. Then the 2 years of the transformational activities, which are the contours of which are only heard by us broadly. We who are now in the veteran community do not know the exact kind of work that he's done. And I'm glad General Shukla spoke first because he gave us a little peep here and there into the kind of work that he has done, whether it is the DMA or integrated capability development and other things. So I'm really grateful to Aditya for this, that he's invited and General Raj Shukla agreed to speak to us, because he gave us into peep as to how he was handling so adroitly a very tough task of raising uh, the integrated structures. While as army chief, his transformation for the new age warfare, transformation of the armed forces, operational issues like the integrated battle groups and several other such issues show the bent of a mind of the man. And I think then Raj Shukla said that. I'm sorry, Raj, and I'm drawing on
No, no, sir.
referring to you all the time, because
I'm indebted,
you've
sir.
just spoken before me, and I know I don't want to repeat things, but he has uh, prepared prepared us for the transformation, whether it is uh, technology or information warfare, both in these appointments seamlessly. Atmanirbharta, modernization, CMR, these are the subjects that have already been spoken of. I intended to talk about that. I'm not going to repeat that. I think his uh, General Rawat's one great ability has been really put to good use over here in this process of transformation and integration. And that is his ability to be able to interact, convince the leadership or officials above the Ministry of Defense, beyond the Ministry of Defense. And I'm referring to whether it is the leadership or the bureaucrats or any other officials in different ministries, different departments. His ability to interact with them, to strike up a very fine rapport with them, put our point of view across. And on the other hand, to be able to talk to a Jawan, he would keep his hand on a Jawan's shoulder and be able to speak to him. I think this is the ability that he has put to good use while preparing us for this new transformation. I think those who have served in the IDS, or who are serving in the IDS now, are really privy to. I've had some discussions with some of these officers, and one understands as to what a tough task it is to to dot the i's and cross the t's when it comes to raising the structure, when it is raising a structure like the Department of Military Affairs. You are facing, I mean, I'm talking of he, I've had several interactions with him. He would not come out so openly, but other officers, some of them I know, and socially or wherever I've met them, or because of St. George, he um, has not shied away from locking horns with anyone. And the tough task was, he was at times facing friction in the beginning, at least, from the bureaucracy on one hand and all the three services on the other. Let me be very frank. At one social event when I met him, I joked with him, like I said, so you used to also, as army chief, when I was CISC, chief of IDS, and I would come up with these proposals, you would actually oppose me to thin nail, along with the other chiefs. And I would always request you, sir, at least I look up to you for support. And so he would say, we are always role playing. And today I am the CDS. Nothing can shake me away from this role. I will make this happen. So I think we need to salute that man's capability of putting things in motion. And like I said earlier, Raj also said this, that whatever shape this takes, there will be some modifications, there will be some changes in as we go along. We will perhaps not be able to adhere to timelines in some cases, but whatever shape it takes, it will always be remembered that as the first CDS, it was General Rawat who had this vision to think big, who had this courage to step out, who did not mind being controversial. And it is the best homage that can be paid to such a persona, such a personality, is by carrying forward the issues that he had set in motion and doing them or executing them with renewed enthusiasm. Thank you very much. Jai Hind. Sir, you are mute.
Thank you, Jal Dua. Thank you. I was on mute for a while. You have brought in a very interesting perspective because you saw it up close at IDS headquarters. Having served in Army headquarters on 2 or 3 tenures, I know it's the most difficult thing is to extricate something from 3 services. For them to be convinced to yield tough. There is a little story. People say last time the CDS file had reached PMO and it was to be signed. I think during PM Vajpayee's time, and that time it was scuttled at the last minute. And the great lobbying which was taken place is that the chief that time, army chief, was trying to make someone else as the CDS, and that influential person was trying to yank out the army chief and make him the CDS. But there was a consensus on one issue. Nobody wanted to leave the army house. Army house was the so when you have a new raising, there are challenges, and General Rawat combated those challenges. We have to remain aware of that. We have now Admiral Shekhar Sinha, Aditya.
Yes, sir.
Yes, General, I'm
I
here.
have the onerous responsibility of inviting Admiral Shekhar Sinha, who really needs no great introduction. He has been in IDS headquarters when I used to go for SCAP CC conferences and SCAP CHC conferences to fight for various categorizations. He was the man who used to take the last call. He also had the privilege of commanding the most powerful naval command, Western Naval Command, and he has multiplicity of experiences. And he incidentally comes from a service which is maximum for jointness. You know, I did my staff course with the Navy. And why I did is because Admiral Nadkarni at that time was pushing for jointness in 89-90. And he was saying that let us send officers on cross attachment like this. So we are going to get a naval perspective. And Navy, my hope for jointness, the firm base is always Indian Navy. That's why probably General Rawat was trying first to set up the Maritime Command. That's why probably he had great faith that Navy will take his vision forward by giving us that firm base. So over to Admiral Sinha, sir. Sir, would you be taking what, 5 to 8 minutes?
That'll be enough since I've spoken in the
Thank you,
beginning.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, General, for that very kind and generous introduction. My interaction with General Rawat in great detail started only after he became CDS. And as I said, he was a person who never hesitated in reaching out to anybody. And if he thought that person will be useful, or his knowledge or his background will be useful in making this jointness, a success and possibility. And all our generals have said it before me very lucidly as to what he was made of. I did not have the good fortune of having so much of interaction with him. But what I saw of him, little bit while I was in the IDS headquarters and he used to come for some meetings, we would have one-to-one meetings. I found him that very easy to get along, and still convince you with the point that he was making. You could be senior, you could be junior, you could be anybody, even the political class. Let me tell you 2-3 incidents that I am aware of after having sort of retired, become a veteran, that he would actually talk to the Honorable Prime Minister and convince him that this is what he should be doing. And the Prime Minister did that. Particularly his visit to Leh and the front area when he said that Vistarwad nahi chalega. It was a suggestion, original suggestion of the CDS who had actually gone and briefed him. But this is from very sort of, shall I say, credible sort of information from the PMO. The second point that I liked about him, that he could accept the suggestions made, and if he was not very keen to accept those suggestions, he would tell you point blank. You could be anybody saying that no, no, sir, I don't think that in this situation this will work. Uh, I was a sounding board, to be very honest, on many points. He would. I would also provide him with some information if it was, and he would always come back. There's never been an occasion that he has not come back to even insignificant messages that I sent. Maybe after 4 hours, maybe after 5 hours, but he always reverted back. He would quote that message and he said, "Sir, you're right. We have found so and so thing happening and we are going to do so and so thing." It could be Army, it could be Navy, it could be Air Force. Maritime Command, since General KJ mentioned about, you're quite right. On Maritime Command, we have had a number of interactions because he also wanted an opinion from outside the serving naval fraternity, and he called me home a couple of times on that issue. And I found him that he was quite blunt in saying that, sir, this Maritime Command, do we have to have the two separate commands existing and a top boss? I said that would be ideal because the forces and the sea area is so large. To leave it under just one operational control, they may find it very difficult to operationally control this area. And then I gave him a picture that, in the maritime domain awareness, we have nearly 50,000 contacts at any one time. And to find friend and foe is not easy. And I'm not counting fishing boats. I'm talking about all big ships, combatants, which are 300 tons and more. And time will come when you'll find that so and so has sneaked out, so and so has not got an AIS on. So my suggestion is that you have a maritime command, you have a theatre commander, but you do have the western and eastern seaboard very clearly defined the way it is defined. The Dondra Head is the dividing line, to the east of Dondra Head and west of Dondra Head, the two command in chief. But I did suggest to him that Andaman Nicobar command needs to be made part of the Eastern Naval Command as far as naval action is concerned, because then you can use one commander in chief, maybe somewhere else. So which I thought that it was very gracious of him to revert back to me at one time. He said that we are doing it. Giving this information even before it is made public, which was made public later on. But I thought it required a lot of guts for a CDS to tell somebody who's retired and is often on the TV channels talking. Fortunately, one could maintain the confidentiality that it deserved. So he was capable of taking risks, and he knew where to take risk and how much success he will get as far as the information is concerned. Because right now it is all war of information as far as the jointness is concerned. Nothing is on the table really. And I still believe that the first command to come will be the Maritime Command, as KJ said. And I'm very confident because now that the Air Defense Command has run into a little bit of, a little more opinions, a little more subjectivity, the Maritime Command is actually ready. And I wouldn't have been surprised, if on 26 January it is actually announced, because everything is ready. There's nothing which is left to doubt. The scope, the Vice Chief of Naval Staff was heading the board with the other two 3-star level officers, members of it. And some of it, they had a discussion with some of us retired people in the Quota House. They called us there. And the Vice Chief then, he had the discussion, full-fledged discussion. So I think this was all idea of General Rawat, that why don't you take a sounding board from, you got people who are all repository of so much of experience, knowledge, whatever it is worth. Maybe even if you get 5% out of this, it may be worth in making that command. So I think two things which come out very clearly that, though my sort of interaction has been so little, but he was so free. I invited him to my son's wedding reception on 28th of November and he came. He was there for 2.5 hours. He met everybody, all my relatives. Can you imagine from in-law side, my son's in-law side? They're all in tears, when he went, they were all glued to the TV and said, what has happened? We can't believe this. That is the influence of that man. And, General Shukla was saying, absolutely right. He has influenced, he has touched lives of so many people that you can't imagine. And what you saw on the roads of Delhi, it was just a reflection of that. His outreach, his human sort of part, he was a tough-speaking general, which he should be. And as I mentioned, somebody asked him that, General, but what you made a statement was politically incorrect. He said, that's for politicians to decide. I'm a military man. I will give a military view. And I think that's too much to say in public. when the whole world is watching, particularly in India, CDS है क्या कर रहा है, क्या बोल रहा है, you know, there's so many opposing views. He never bothered about opposing views. He said, yeah, I mean, they have a view. Everybody is entitled to a view. This is the interaction that I used to have with him. तो he said, सर उनको करने दो, हम वो करेंगे जो हमारे ख्याल से जो ठीक है हमारे देश के लिए. Always for the country. What is best for my country? Not only army, Air Force. In fact, the first service that he began sorting out as CDS was army. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anything what he thought was not right, like General Shukla was saying, you know, we are living in a lot of archaic bloody procedures, this, that. Some of it he started as Chief Army Staff. But now, whatever is balanced, he was actually continuing to do that. And the army, some of the higher echelons were not happy about it. Obviously not. Who said to do this? But, you know, he had a meaning in all this. And I think that, getting into his shoes is not going to be easy. Anybody. And that's a great tribute to that man, not having known him as well as most of you seem to know him. So thank you very much for getting me here, and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Admiral Sinha, sir. As usual, you have added a very warm touch about personal anecdote and also brought out the great qualities which our late CDS displayed, a role model for most of us. So, Aditya, now we have two speakers left, I think, Arun Sani. And are we going to get Gaurav Samant again?
Yeah, we can. We will have Gaurav Sawant, then General
See
Sani.
what happens. There is a time which, you know, in print media at least they say, after which the journalists don't talk to you. So we are reaching that hour for them. So I think let's allow Gaurav Sawant to speak and go back to his channel. And maybe we can also request Army Commander, if he's got other engagements, he could, I can't say carry on. He could devote his time over there. We've got the benefit of that, but if he has time, he's most welcome to steer this discussion with us, sir.
It was so engrossing that I would request your permission to stay on.
Thank you, sir. You're displaying same qualities which you highlighted about Jal Rawat. So now we are going to Gaurav Sawant, who is like you have scholar warriors. He is a soldier journalist. He is half soldier, half journalist. So when you see him on the TV, there is a great amount of josh that he radiates. He speaks with passion, and he has detailed knowledge of things which are happening on the ground. He comes from a very illustrious family. I grew up hearing his dad for commentaries, and so he brings that connect to us. So over to Gaurav. Gaurav, you'll take about, 5 minutes? Channels are waiting for you.
Sir, thank you very much. Very kind of you. For me, it's a sir. I am the listening post, sir. With due respect, sir. There is so much that I'm learning just being on this platform as we pay our respects to General Bipin Rawat. Just a short while back, I was sharing some details of my interactions with General Rawat when he was Army Chief, and when he became CDS, and even earlier. Also, the aspect that General Shukla was raising about engaging with the media, about talking to the media. Sir, my only request always has been, as long as you continue to talk to us, we get a better perspective to put out and to be able to tell the wider world what's happening. It's one part of that debate that we're able to carry forward. If I may, there was this incident of Major Gogoi, and there was a huge controversy around that incident of Major Gogoi, and it was a violation of the Geneva Convention and everything. He gave us a story which wasn't to put out on TV in terms of signaling, messaging. It may have been wrong, but no lives were lost, no firing had to be resorted to. So he said our aim was to ensure that a young officer is able to think out of the box. That young officer would have shot his way out of that situation and nothing would have been lost, and everyone would have said whatever has happened is right. He used somebody who he knew is what I was told. Whether and was able to come out of a situation. So we got a different perspective. We were able to, as journalists, we were able to give both sides of the story, balance out a situation, a story, and then give that out. He would always give us the military perspective on any situation. Whether it was that foreign liquor thing in the canteen, or one rank, one pension, the veterans who was agitating. He had a point of view on everything, often not on camera, but at least getting that point across for media to be able to put out. On Doklam, on the Balakot strikes, as you very rightly pointed out, the reassuring the nation, reassuring the government that there will be no backlash in case we do a Balakot, or even when 370 was removed, he was able to send across that message that the nation will be able to handle it, and we were able to transmit that message once we were convinced, because in his office we could argue, we could take those questions. नहीं ऐसा नहीं होगा, escalate हो गया, escalation ladder के हम top पर नहीं होंगे, so even say अच्छा ये टीवी के लिए नहीं है, ये तुम्हारे लिए है. That was perhaps one of the best things that we were able to learn and understand from him. कि टीवी पर क्या बोलना है इज योर डिस्क्रेशन, लेकिन ये असल खबर इस तरह से है that we are on top of the situation, sir. Rest, I'm a listening post here, sir. I'm getting educated. Thank you very much, sir.
So General Sani has joined.
Thank you, Gaurav. Once again, you brought a very see, journalists sometimes get to see what we don't get to see because they are upfront, and some of them enjoy a great amount of relationship wherein communication, which is private sometimes, maybe later after time has lapsed, can be shared. So that kind of perspective you brought out. Thank you very much, Gaurav, and thank you for staying on to listen. We have now with us General Arun Sahni. General Arun Sahni he attended the same higher command course as General Bipin Rawat. He was one of the senior people over there, probably, and he was our mentor, guide. And he was a very close friend of General Rawat, and his wife, Mrs. Sani, also is leading the ladies' articulation. So Madhulika Rawat, the lady, she had a wonderful personality. I'd just like to say a small anecdote that I had. I was attending a wedding, and I found for some time Mrs. Rawat standing alone. So I didn't know her so well because she didn't join the higher command. She didn't come with that time Colonel Rawat for higher command course. He was staying single. So I hadn't met her very frequently, only sometimes in Kolkata when he was MGGS and she used to visit. Otherwise, she was staying in London. So I walked up to her and she joked with me. She said, so you have decided to leave India and come to Pakistan? So I said, no, but you are the first lady. You can't be standing alone. That is just not done. And I'm appalled at the kind of protocol people are following. Someone has to stand next to you. So we had a nice conversation. And I found her to be very grounded. My wife tells me she was very friendly, connected, and she wore her royalty in a very dignified manner. She never gave an impression that she came from the royal family, and very wonderful lady. I also would like to say 2 or 3 sentences about Brigadier Lidda. He was commanding the Poo Brigade, and I was just retiring, and I maintained contact with him whenever there was some issue. I used to, because that brigade, somehow I was lucky to sort of steer that brigade from sector to brigade to independent infantry brigade. So I had some stake in that brigade, and I would occasionally get in touch with him. A thorough professional, a very wonderful man. I met him in 27th of October when he had come to Chandi Mandir with Jan Rawat. And what I'll tell you something, you may find it little funny. The Poo Brigade commander has got a huge big orchard, and there are apples which grow there, wild, just like that. So what happens is they send it to some people in Chandi Mandir. So obviously you are his RO, so apples come to army commander also. So I had retired, and some apples arrived from Poo. So I rang him up. I said, "Listen, yaar, I am retired." He said, "Sir, you are retired, but not disconnected from us." So is a great man of great. I know his dad also, great family, and see his wife and daughter. What an example of stoicism and what dignity they've set for us. Wonderful fortitude. So I'll go back to Jalsani, who's been the corps commander in Dimapur, who's been the army commander in Southwestern Command. He has very rich experience of having served in Northeast, in Valley. He is also one of these Atmanirbhar technology gurus. Currently, he's engaged in trying to get defense production started up, and he's interacting with the private industry. He's trying to steer them. So, and he has very close personal relationship with Jal Rawat. So, Sani sir, when you speak, nobody can stop you, but try and do it in about 8 odd minutes. Sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, KJ. I mean, it's great to see friends on the screen in the virtual domain. Good to see Raj Shukla there. You yourself cheering, Satish, Aditya, Gaurav. Great to see you. And I just sort of joined rather late. But may I just say that I think, like all of you would have realized, I think one of the greatest quality that Bipin had, other than firing from the hip at times, which was brilliant. I think you need to be a soldier to do that. But more importantly, I think he connected with each of us in a very personal matter. I think a relationship developed on one-on-one basis. And I think it would be unfair to say that one was closer and the other wasn't. But I think he had this uncanny ability, and which is, I think, something which is quite unique about him. Whether he connected with the political hierarchy, with the bureaucratic hierarchy, whether he connected with his colleagues, peer group, he had a phenomenal capacity to do a one-on-one relationship. And one of the good things that I noticed, having been at the apex for so many years, if any of us ever approached him, and I'm not saying me myself, but any of the colleagues that whom he had served with earlier, he would take out time, even if it was, if you really wanted to meet him urgently on an issue and wanted to share something, it could be as late as 7:38, and he never hesitated to tell you, ki, "Sir, I'm still in the office, but if you don't mind, can you just come in now at about 7:30?" So I think that personal quality of being able to link with everyone and develop a personal equation is what really was his hallmark. And I think that speaks wonderful in the manner, the way the country has honored him here. I think the dignity that has been accorded to the senior most man in uniform of the armed forces, by whether the political, civil, or by the neighboring countries, I think needs no, yeah, I think nothing else needs to be said except that he did reach out to everyone, and thanks to him, a lot of us were, I would say, not strong supporters of the changes that he was wanting to uh, steer. But that is okay. I think the issue is, in any organization, there will always be the status quo. There will be always people who would have ills, and the challenge and the charisma of the leader is when he can take all of them together and be able to sort of weld them to keep the machine moving in the right direction. I think he achieved that to a great extent. I would say, as he said, the heart goes out for all of us who are sitting here on the screen and those around, for the two girls, both his daughters, uh, amazing young girls, the way they've conducted themselves and with dignity on the podium. But whatever you say, losing parents in a manner so sudden is something which I think one can't, words cannot express the shock and grief that those two children would be feeling. And I think I was fortunate. Neetu went and met them today, my wife. Unfortunately, when the accident happened, I was out of the country. I just got in yesterday. But may I just say about Bipin, I think he grew and matured as he kept rising in the armed forces. Uh, he had this great ability, which is what all leaders should have, is not to look at your past capability and your charter there, but to be able to adapt yourself for the new challenges that come with the new appointments that you hold and the responsibilities that come with it. I think he is an epitome as far as that is concerned, whether it was being a co-commander to an area commander to being an army commander in the Southern Command, coming as vice chief, and now as CDS. I think the 6-7 years at the apex were tremendous experience for somebody like him to be then at the pinnacle to steer changes. Because I'm a firm believer that visionary and major strategic changes in any organization can only happen with somebody who's grown up in the organization and then has the vision to be able to see outside the box and then be able to precipitate, oblique, initiate the change and then steer the change ahead. That I think was something which he was very ably uh, capable of. And we would have a certain amount of slowing down. There would be a pause, but I'm sure changes will continue, and that's the strength of the armed forces. Uh, it does get sort of stymied by events like these, but that is a momentary kind of a stage. The next chapter moves in, and the as I say, the action will continue to happen in the right direction, and the organization will grow. But I think what he could have contributed, and there was a lot more that he could have done in the next year and a half that he was at the pinnacle, and maybe subsequently being outside with so much of experience, he would have been a great mentor for all those who would be in service at that stage. That loss is going to be felt by all of us. Uh, and I think that goes in the official capacity, but more importantly, I think as a personal friend, as a personal individual with very simple wants in life, with being very austere in his lifestyle, in his requirements, I think both he was absolutely outstanding. His wife, one of the reasons why we became close was as she didn't come for high command, but then after high command, when we moved, my wife and my two girls stayed on in Noida, and she was in Noida, and she spent a large amount of his early life to look after his father, who was himself as a retired vice chief. The old man was alone in Noida, so she stayed on there and looked after her father-in-law for many years till he passed away much later. So I think she sacrificed, I would say, her marital time to be there to look after the responsibilities. That itself speaks about what kind of a person she was. Tremendous amount of grace is one aspect, but I think more importantly, the connect, the emotional bond, the responsibility, the value for relationships. That is something which she was phenomenal at. I know Neetu still, whenever we wanted to communicate, you would promptly get a reply back from her, even now in their busy schedule. So I think when you look at those qualities, it speaks well that he was the right man at the right place. It is extremely unfortunate. I thought when he had a very nasty accident, as you're all aware, when he was 3 Corps commander, where the chopper fell down and he survived. So I had mentioned to him, I said, God destined for you to do a lot many other good things for us. That's why you're there. Otherwise, with that accident, it would have been a rarity to have survived that accident the way it happened. But well, destiny was on his side. And this time, I think destiny did not play well for us. And whoever actually was responsible for whatever be the cause of the lapse, we've lost a good friend. The nation has lost a good leader. We've lost a family has been broken. Bondages have gone. Our heart goes out to them, and maybe just say, may he and his wife both rest in peace. And as far as the girls are concerned, well, I'm sure the fraternity of the army is so large that we will be there to look after them, provide the shoulder that is required, which the parents would have provided. With that, I would just hand over and just say, uh, we've lost a good friend, we've lost a good leader, we've lost a good army man, we've lost a good comrade, and all of us, as I said, had a special bond with him, and that is something which we're going to miss very, very dearly. Thank you very much, and good to see all old friends on the virtual domain together to just pay homage to his credible journey in the army. Jai Hind, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Jan Sani sir. As usual, you have given very sort of personal and very interesting touches and brought out his journey and also the kind of legacy he's left for us. And you've also brought out the fact that what a wonderful family. I also saw that when he was MGGS, for he had got his father over there and he was looking after him. So he was in the sense sometimes in such a busy job, he was devoting time to his father. I had been to his house where he used to stay in Fort William, and his father was not well. He was quite unwell, and the way the amount of time Bipin would find for his father. So the man had great qualities, very difficult to emulate, but he will be a mentor, a guide for generations. He has set such high benchmark. So see, there is an old saying like even in military funerals, they sound the rouse after the last post, and there is this old maxim that the king is dead, long live the king. At the very next moment, there is a king. So, king there will be for sure. Government is engaged in that process. CDS is going to get appointed. A suitable king would get appointed. But Bipin has left his stamp. Bipin has left his hallmark, and he'll be missed. That is for sure. So now I have this onerous responsibility. Next in line is Sandeep Marva.
Sir, I would request just everyone to wait. We have General Ghansham Katoj,
Okay.
who is a, you can say, a fellow friend and of Brigadier leader, and who was a senior and
Okay,
also this time kind of.
give me that privilege because
Yes, sir.
Ghanshyam is a coursemate of mine. We
Sir.
come from the same scon, Charlie scon. General Bipin Rawat also was from Charlie scon, 1 year junior to us. Then he, and see the great quality of General Rawat. He lost one term in NDA. He busted his knee. He survived an air crash, and he went along. In that air crash, I was army commander. I wanted to speak to him. I was told no, he's already gone. He sat in the next aircraft, a helicopter, without taking care of. He would have been jolted. After all, it was a very hard landing, and helicopter had disintegrated. But he quickly summoned another helicopter and went to meet the chief in Arunachal. So he had not taken disability for his wound medal that he had. So now we have the privilege or pleasure of interaction with General Ghanshyam Katoj, who is been DGPP. He has been the Corps Commander of 12 Corps in Desert. He has a profile of commanding the 2 Mountain Division in the Northeast. And he is currently, he earlier headed a think tank for one of the CAPFs, NSG, and currently he is running the affairs in USI. He happens to be from the Jack Rifles, and Brigadier Lidder also happened to be from Jack Rifles. So I would request him to speak about him also and about General Rawat, whatever he wants to see, because as DGPP and in USI, he would have had a fair, and General Katoj has also had multiple tenures in MO, MS, whichever elite section you can think of, he's been there. So over to General Katoj, maybe 5 to 8 minutes, sir.
Yeah, maybe about 10 minutes, KJ.
Okay, sir. To you, I cannot say no, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, KJ. And first of all, good evening to all the esteemed people on this panel and Aditya and the Global CT Council. Thank you for having me on it. Actually, Rakesh Sharma and me were to speak right in the beginning. Rakesh about General Rawat and me about Brigadier Lakhvinder. But today, both of us attended the Bhog ceremony of Brigadier Lakhvinder. And after that, both of us, and of course, he was from
that is Lieutenant Colonel Harjinder Singh's cremation we attended, and that's why we got a little late. And may I also mention here that one of the reasons why I'm wearing this cap on my head is that this was presented to me by Lieutenant Colonel Harjinder just 2 weeks back. And he had served under me when I was co-commander. He was 2IC of his battalion. And he got this cap made for me and, with my regimental colors on it. So I said, I must wear this cap when I come and speak here today. Now, I will be speaking actually only on Brigadier Lakhvinder, and that is for the reason that maybe Rakesh will also speak on on General Rawat, and all of you have spoken so much about General Rawat that there is very little left for me to say, other than the fact that he was also a colleague and a friend. And as General KJ said, we were from the same squadron, Charlie Squadron. And of course, he was also from my school also, Cameron or Dehradun. Of course, though he did his last classes, I think, from St. Edward's at Shimla. And at the outset, I must say my condolences to the near and dear ones of all the 13 lives lost, who in their passing have touched the hearts of 130 million Indians. In fact, today, when I was attending Lieutenant Colonel Harjinder's funeral, Mrs. Geetika Lidder was also there. And before she left the Bhog ceremony, she told my wife, she said, Mrs. Katoch, I'll have to, take leave because her father and other relatives were there to look after the other guests. But she said, I must do my last military duty. And she went there. And when I spoke to her there, she says, General Katoch, I'm feeling so bad that there are 13 houses where this sort of ceremony would have taken place. So we mourn the passing of all the 30. But today I am here to pay an eulogy to Brigadier Lakhvinder Singh Lidder, Tony to his friends, Lucky to me. I generally didn't call him Tony, I called him Lucky. And he had a sterling carrier profile, which I'll very briefly recount. He was commissioned into 2nd Battalion of the Jammu and Kashmir Rifles, to which I also belong. And of course, I commanded a different battalion later. He commanded the same battalion, 2nd Jammu and Kashmir Rifles, firstly on the western border, and later in the Democratic Republic of Congo, when it was under the North Kivu Multinational Brigade, commanded by then Brigadier Bipin Rawat. And it is, I presume, there that General Rawat would have seen the qualities this officer had, that after he had finished his NDC, he asked him for his MA. He had served in CICT operations in JK and along the LAC in the Eastern Theatre at Along. Also commanded a brigade at Poo, where he was awarded a VSM, which is on the northern borders. As a young officer, he was he was an instructor at the NDA, which is a very, prize posting, we all know. Very, very officers, a lot of promise go there. He served as the adjutant of the Indian Military Academy, G1 in MO Directorate, Defense Attaché in Kazakhstan, Colonel Logistics in RR Force Headquarters. And then, of course, he attended the Higher Command course, the NDC, and, of course, his last appointment was the DA to the CDS. He was approved for Major General and waiting to pick up his rank, which would have been by January next year. So, a sterling profile. Our 28-year-long association started in 1993, when we spent 3 years in intense CI operations in Kashmir. He had 2.5 years service then, and I had 16. I had joined the unit after a 3-year tenure in MO Directorate, and for a 2.5-year service officer, someone coming from Delhi, especially from MO Directorate, was like the epitome of wisdom and intellect. Though all of us here know that a major in MO Directorate is the lowest rung of the pecking order in the defense headquarters. But in spite of this big gap in our service and age, we hit it off quite well. In fact, anyone who met him would not forget him, and he would not forget them. On his passing away, I have received calls from a number of people, Jawans from the unit, shopkeepers, hotel staff at the hotel where just recently, as in the month of July, my son's wedding was held and he was there, and a large number of my relatives, friends and cosmates who came to know him through me. In fact, his wife Geetika stated at his Bhog ceremony today that she will be able to live her life with ease because he's left so much of goodwill that she will never want for support. He was dynamic, brave, witty, intelligent, tough, mature, even with 3 years service. He could gel with young and old alike. And I remember in counterinsurgency operations, of course, that was in the period 93 to 95. But later on, in 1999, a movie came called Sarfarosh, Amir Khan's movie, which had a character of an Inspector Salim. And Inspector Salim had a knack of getting people into talking and make them part with the information. And Lakhvinder had that knack. Young and old, he could befriend them and get information out of them, which made him so successful in counterinsurgency operations. He only needed a brief indication from a CO, General Suneja, that time, and he would make a plan for operations, coordinate every minute aspect of the movement, deployment, and execution. And the unit owed a large number of successes to him. He was awarded a Sena Medal and 2 Chief's Commendation cards during that tenure, but he deserved many more. I was with him in an operation at Sopore in November 93, where he got injured in a firefight with militants, eliminated a number of them, and was awarded the Sena Medal that I just mentioned. He was hit in the thigh with a bullet, and after a bandage was put on him, and the bullet was inside only, it had not gone through. Luckily, no bones were broken. He put on a bandage and hopped around to convince the CO that he could manage and did not need evacuation. But however, we did evacuate him because thereafter another Jawan of ours got injured also. So both of them we sent them. In fact, I remember at least on 2 occasions during our tenure when in an encounter he would get in front of the CO, General Suneja, stating that he was a bachelor while the CO had a family. So, I mean, what more can I say about a young officer in operations? He was the perfect officer. Geetika, his wife, and he were the perfect couple. And Geetika and their 17-year-old Ashna were the perfect family. And sometimes, I feel that we have a very subcontinental concept called Nazar Lag Jana. So, Nazar, aapke well-wishers ki bhi lag jati hai. So, buri nazar is of your enemies, but nazar lag jana, well-wishers ki bhi lag jati hai. And sometimes I feel hamari nazar lagi because we always said they are perfect. He attended my son's wedding in July and found time in his busy schedule. He told the CDS that, sir, this is one wedding that he had to attend. And Geetika was all over coordinating everything at the Hyatt Chandigarh where the wedding was held. And of course, KJ, I'm sorry you could not attend because you were in Bombay that time. And Ashna was the life of the Sangeet and other festivities. Lakhvinder and Geetika were or are like our daughter-in-law and son to me and my wife. Yet when he was in uniform, he was my brother officer, my colleague in arms. We were looking forward to him reaching heights beyond mine for which he had all the qualities and qualifications. His daughter called us Dada and Dadi and said so at a function at the Kota House, where her maiden book of poems called In Search of a Title, Musings of a Teenager was released by Dr. Kiran Bedi and late Mrs. Madhulika Rawat, among others, on 27th of November last month only. So it's a lovely book of poems. It is doing very well. It's on the bestseller list and at 17-year-old. So the whole family was actually perfect. I was also told that I must say something about his contribution to national security. Well, to tell you, he had not reached that level where he would directly make or influence national security. But General Rawat had picked him up so that he would do all the spade work to enable the CDS to attend to matters of national security. And Lakhvinder did that. A good staff officer is competent. He exercises initiative, applies critical and creative thinking. He's adaptable, flexible, has self-confidence, cooperative, reflective. I mean, a whole lot of things. And Lakhvinder had all these qualities and much more than that. That 1 year that he was with the CDS, he was busy 24/7 and we know it. He was always coming back at 8 o'clock from the office and we knew the CDS was also there all that time. It is not that the CDS, he kept on working after the CDS went off. The CDS was working very hard. We all know it. You all have mentioned it. And all officers who have spoken already, they have mentioned that. The only few days that he took off in that 1 year were about a week for his niece's wedding because his brother-in-law, who was an engineer major, had died long ago in a vehicle accident. Very sad thing in the family. And he had taken 3 days leave subsequently for my son's wedding. Another intangible contribution that I would say that he's made to national security is in his passing. He has made his wife and daughters so strong that on TV, their strength, composure, and resolve was evident to the nation. It's a lasting message to any adversary of ours that in case families can be so strong, then the soldiers, sailors, and airmen of this nation will be formidable. Such conduct in the face of adversity puts iron in the spine of every Indian. So I'll end by saying that Brigadier Lidder is now a liberated soul, waiting to be reborn, or maybe he's already born. He's not a hero who once trod the earth and has now left it. I'm sure in our hearts and minds, he's there, and therefore he's everywhere and in every one of us. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about somebody who was both my son and my brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jal Katoch. You have uh, given a very wonderful tribute to Brigadier Lakhvinder Lidda. Allow me to just chip in with a little bit that he, in his command of 136 Independent Infantry Brigade Group, which looks after about 200 kilometers of Chinese border with Himachal, had a very tough responsibility because uh, as army commander, we had ramped up that brigade, starting with one infantry battalion and one Himachal Scout or Dogra Scout battalion and one light regiment. It had become a brigade group with one Himachal Scout, but three infantry battalions, a medium regiment and a light regiment, an engineer full company, signal company, and all the associated elements which goes. And new military stations had been set up. He and I have an abiding interest in that brigade. So I would often speak to him, at least when I felt like that Nakula thing happened when China came. So there is a pass which is called Kyobrang Pass. Now one is worried. So I called him up and he came back to me. Another time there was an avalanche in that area. So I did convey my concern that look after your boys. So he did a commendable job in that brigade group on all accounts. So he made great contribution to our lives and the fact that we are secure. And he comes from a very illustrious family. His father lives in Panchkula, and I met him in October, like I told you, when he came with CDS, and he was all energy, Josh. It's such an unfortunate thing for such a young man who had so much promise to go away so early. But the only way you can condole yourself is that God also needs people who are good but young, So he calls them early sometimes. So now, Aditya, we have to go to Sandeep Marwa.
No, sir, we have General Rakesh Sharma
Okay.
about his tribute to his friend Bipin and Madhu.
So now, thank you, General Katoch. We have the pleasure and privilege of interaction with General Rakesh Sharma. Rakesh is also from our course. He served in he and General Bipin Rawat served in the same battalion. Rakesh, when he was CO, Bipin was his 2IC. So they have great bondage of same unit and of course same regiment. He has a wealth of experience. He's been the Adjutant General of this army. He has commanded the corps in Sikkim, in Ladakh Leh, 14 Corps. He is today India's one of the foremost experts on what is happening in Ladakh, and he regularly appears on TV. Currently, he is with IDSA, and before that, he was a defense banking advisor with Punjab National Bank. And besides that, he has experience in all kinds of terrain and environment. He's also been to Nigeria for his higher command equivalent course. So, and he's been on a training team in Botswana, I think. So, Rakesh, you take about 10 minutes.
Sir, 15 minutes. 15
okay.
Minutes.
So go ahead, take 15 minutes and over to General Rakesh Sharma.
Thank you, KJ. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you, Gansham. And thank you, Army Commander Artrak, for sitting on, and to everybody else. We have been having long days, like Ghanshyam mentioned. Mine started at 7 in the morning when Havaldar Satpal, whose body was being taken today in the morning to Bagdogra, to his home station, and then of course Tony Lakhvinder's Bhog, and followed by Harjinder's funeral. All nerve-wracking experience. I totally endorse what largely all of you have spoken about Bipin, so I will not be try not be repetitive as what has been said. In his death, Bipin has galvanized this nation. In our lifetime, we haven't seen a death in which the nation has risen as one. I remember as AG, we saw the sad demise of the President Abdul Kalam, and there were huge queues in Rajaji Marg or people wanting to pay their respects to President Abdul Kalam. And we haven't seen in our lifetimes an outpouring of this grief. In a drive yesterday to Haridwar, and we spent whole day there, there were crowds en route. There were placards. Many, you can say, are politically driven, but the flowers being showered across to the convoy right up to Haridwar, and it looked as if the Ganges had gone still. And I am not exaggerating it. The crowds on the bridges and the crowds at Haridwar were unimaginable. So in his passing away, the armed forces lost a lot. The nation has recognized the army, and nation has recognized a great son of the army. As has been rightly said, I will not talk about myself at all. It's not my time to say. It's my time to talk about those who left us. Bipin Rawat joined 78, came as vote of honor. He came from Dehradun. I had known him earlier. I am from Dehradun myself, St. Thomas, but we had known him, and Dad's ADC also. For 3.5 years, brought Bipin's Bharat to Delhi, Ashok Road. As was rightly pointed out, Madhu is from the Shadows royal family, and the marriage took place in 25 Ashok Road, which was a Congress venue for marriages those days. And we took Bharat, stayed in Kanishka, and we went back. Those happy days. The Bharat of his sister Kiran came to Bathinda, where I was ADC, and so the family has been like my own family and better. I have not known a friend of this kind, and the loss is indeed very grievous, very, very grievous. Both of them, Madhu, and whether he was in uniform or formally decked up, it's not a time we've not hugged each other and laughed and smiled. It's last Saturday. It's now 7 days ago, when we were celebrating the 511 GR's Golden Jubilee of the war, when he was dancing in a dance called Chavre. I think the Jacrif types who have a little semblance of Gurkhas, though they wish to forget about it. But they know Jhavre is a dance where you sit down on your haunches and you push your leg one side to the other side. And at this age, Bipin was doing Jhavre. His fancy, his human side actually gets hidden by his stoic and the strong qualities. He had a fantastic personal side, and his personal side is actually not so well written, chronicled, and seen. That was visible until midnight. We were just jiving away. It's unimaginable that it's this Saturday. It's just Saturday gone by, and today, 8th day, that we are talking and paying homage to this great man. His was a different persona. We have spoken many things. I'd say my impressions, and I have not have a script in front of me. He's the rarest amalgam of somebody who's very hardworking and who's very professionally intellectual. Two different qualities. Many people are hardworking and lack the intellect, and vice versa. He had both. And to add to it, even when he was a second lieutenant, he had that forthrighteousness. He had the courage of conviction of saying something. You have done high command, many of you have done your HC30 types, you look down upon other HC types. He wouldn't mince words. He said his mind. Even then, as a lieutenant, he would get up and say it said his mind. Many have related this to flippancy. Many says that he tends to call spade a spade, overspoke his time, maybe explained it, too many things which did not be explained. Behind that astute mind behind that so-called slippancy and impromptuness and just shooting from the hip, as they call it, was an astute mind that deliberated on the issues, formed an opinion, and then stated it. The clash of civilizations did not come on that impromptu manner or reading a script. 15 days prior to that, he had read the book. He debated the clash of civilizations. He made his mind on it. Many of us would have differed. We would have accepted. But he stuck to his guns. He said so. That's courage of conviction. How many of us would have spoken about support to Major Gogoi and in the tenor and tone he mentioned? And he repeated this recently in the Times Now conclave. That's the strength of courage of conviction. He was convinced that he was right. How many of us in command of troops in insurgency would have said the stone throwing, stone pelters are terrorists? Maybe I wouldn't have said it. I would be hesitant to say so. In India, where every man, Tom, Dick, and Harry knows China is a threat. For 50 years, we have not spoken of China as a threat. We underplayed it. We underplayed. This was a man who said, and despite the fact that there would be obvious fallbacks and people saying, no, it's not true. Like he knew what clash of civilization had a fallback, saying that, no, we do not accept that. That's the soft peddling that our nation does. He stood and said, China is a threat. How many of people beyond Bipin Rawat would stand today and fight and who are at the helm of affairs wearing uniform and stay so in public domain saying India is a threat? People will make long sentences, go round and round and round and say it without saying it. That was Bipin Rawat. That's courage of conviction. That is courage, and it doesn't come up by shooting from the hip or being flippant. It comes for having deliberated on the issues. That is the strength of the character of that man, that he understood what is right. He understood what has to be stated at that time. Our opinions didn't matter, as rightly been pointed out. The social media, people writing word trash they write. This is the first meeting I've addressed in last 4 days after Bipin passed away. I have not gone to any TV channel, not that I have not invitations. I had a lot of invitations to write. I did not do it till the time today when events are behind us. But suffice it to say that there was something different in him, and that difference is not understood. People tend to take briefcases issue. Well, he had a case on file in which a briefcase was handled. So he says he doesn't like it. He knew it. It may have sounded like a generic remark, but then there was a case and he said so. And he said so because he came from an actual knowledge. If he said that officers are getting disability without being disabled, was he wrong? No, it was a deliberate remark meant to address even the community who was granting disability. If they caught in outside Taurus canteen liquor being sold, well, of course he said liquor to be bought. He said, no, why has he stopped my scotch? That comes from conviction. That comes from his desire to achieve something. All that added to his the galvanizing the nation. Why does nation get up and state in this manner that yes, this is a brave soldier who has passed away? He is. There is no storytelling about him. People say contribution about CICT. KJ sir, you can tick me off when I say that, sir, you are giving a political speech. But when I finish my time, please just do warn me. Once upon a time, I have gone actually and to every office command and every office staff from colonel onwards, wherever he's posted, I've gone and stayed with him. So has he done. Up to 14 Corps, he came and stayed with me, and all my commands. And once I landed up in 5 Sector RR, and he was commanding 5 Sector RR, as many of us will know. We were all contemporaries there. And there was peace in Sopor. Peace in Sopor. There was problem in South Kashmir. How was peace in Sopor? Why there is no fighting? Why no terrorism in Sopor? Sopor is the same area which Ghanshyam will recollect, through entire 8 division did an operation to clear it. And then, all this Kunan, Poshpora, which all we have been referring to, all this have happened at time. But there was peace. There was no fighting in Sopor proper. Why? And, he put up the CO's name for a highest award, saying that he is not fired a shot in Sopor throughout his tenure as a CO. I forget his name. Why? Because he said, sir, he's brought peace into the most difficult of areas without firing a shot. He has done it. Well, that's success. Yeah. That is, people say, well, okay, killings, number of killings did not matter. You can count the number of killings that happened in his tenure in 19 days will be different as it is. But then still, there was an approach to it. I would say, and I will end with this, I am also bushed. So is there a legacy left behind? Is there an enduring legacy left behind? Is there diversity of imprint left behind by General Bipin Rawat? Well, yes, I would say yes. Unfortunately, our organization tends to, next man coming in thinks that he knows better than the previous chap. This typically happens. Is, you tend to wash away the good work being done. Hopefully, the Prime Minister has spoken yesterday saying that he will make sure the legacy is listened on to. But there is an imprint. There is a desire. The whole nation has debated integration as an issue. A year and a half in CDS tenure. Who has not spoken as CDS? People have criticized the functioning of DMA. He said very clearly once that the organization of DMA as it was created was path-breaking. But despite the fact, every responsibility was left on the head of the CDS because the delegation of powers did not take place in the DMA. That's what troubled in year and a half and pushed the changes to so far back. Now, of course, I'm told things have brought up. So he has left an imprint. Yes, in his cremation, on his the day we were taking him away, there's a joint secretary who came and said he looks after the works. He said, sir, I have handled works for last 15, 20 years of the armed forces. And on the year that the Master Works program or the MWP program is supposed to be implemented, till June, July, the program is not finalized. 3-4 months are lost even when the program is finalized. Today, the program of next 2 years is signed and sealed and issued. That's a change. If he said, okay, the nation wants Daula Kuan to be opened, and for that, some area has to be given out of DSOI and the line and the right down to it. Today, we enjoyed passing through Daula Kuan. How many people would have accepted a push to widen the whole road area and give so much of land like that? Also in Pune, great courage of conviction and great forthrightness. In our senior ranks, as we rise up, we become more and more and more diplomatic. when we talk nowadays in audiences, I also go to so many closed door and open door talks. You tend to mellow down and speak in a very nice and goody fashion, and saying all is well and all will go on well, and things will improve and all that. That's because we become more diplomats than the diplomats. That's the wrong part of us. That's not what was taught to us in our formative years. We suddenly turn our said and we say, no, I think we should go back to the agreements with China because China will see the light of the day. That's because we want to show that we are geostrategists in addition to being soldiers. I think Bipin taught us something in this. Wake up. Wake up. Be soldiers first. Get diplomats later. I'll end by saying that Madhu has been dearest of friends with us. I know very close. She's very close to the ladies of High Command 30. We have been very dear friends, and very, very dear friends. I've seen the children, Tarini and Kritika, born, and that times I've known them as children. I absolutely agree with what Jansani said. In General Rawat's tenures from Kibutu to Baramulla to Sopore to Dimapur, Madhu has actually brought the children up in Noida all by own self, and also looked after by General Lakshman Rawat and Mrs. Rawat when they stayed mostly with him. In the later years when General Rawat was fairly ailing, that he had decided to move around, so he shifted with Bipin in 19 and came to Ramparts in Calcutta and also to Dimapur when he passed away later. But earlier years, Madhu's entire life has been for in-laws and also for her children. Gracious lady, ebullient, smiling, cheerful, presence by herself. I miss her. And as somebody said, we're going to miss Bipin Rawat for many things. For many things. One is that make a plan, make a thought process. Second is force yourself to force execution of it. And man of great honor and integrity, professional and personal. Thank you. Bye-bye, my friend Bipin. Bye-bye, my friend Madhu. All good wishes to you wherever you are. And thank you very much, Aditya and KJ and everybody else for inviting me to speak today. My first talk after Bipin has passed away, and hopefully not many that I would take on, because this is a grave personal loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Jal Rakesh Sharma. You brought a very personal and emotional touch, the regimental connect which the Gurkhas have. So great tribute you paid to Jal Bipin Rawat. I would agree with you because I remember when we did a higher command course, Jal Rawat was one of the few people who always said, people are the center of gravity. Don't look at terrorist groups. Don't look at Tanzim leaders. Focus on people and win them over. And in our discussions, we used to sometimes hypothetically think that can we give unit citations based on number of days school was open in a AOR, number of days the dispensary was open, rather than number of kills. I remember having discussed this with Bipin when he was a colonel and when we were doing higher command together. And what is interesting is that as a Moss, he would go for long walks with us, Balbir and myself, and he wouldn't hesitate to ask questions because he was conscious of the fact that he didn't know about mechanized warfare. So he would ask questions. And now in that course, I was one of the few people who had served in MS branch in army headquarters. So I knew a few things about how army headquarters works. And I had also been with my mate to Jal Mehta just before that course. So he would pick my mind on those issues. And later, when he went as Colonel MS9, he picked up these ideas. These are not his personal ideas, like pension reforms or like putting disincentives in PMR or issues like age or reducing the flab. These are not his personal reforms. These have been going on since Jal VP Malik's days, that we tried to reduce 50,000 people then. But maybe it is the age of social media. So people unnecessarily threw a lot of flack at him. On Twitter, I had to many times caution people, fight with them, because while I disagreed with Jalan Rawat on many issues, but most of the times we agreed to disagree. That was the great quality about him. And he heard your viewpoint. And maybe he gave it because he had responsibility I didn't have. I'm an armchair, so-called pretending to be a thinker at this stage. So, Jal Rawat sir, we'll miss you. You were a great, as you grew in service, you gather. And another thing I'll tell you, like in 33 Core, he was MGGS, and he played out a scenario that China comes through Jamferi Ridge. Now, that was not possible in 2013. It is not even possible today, because you can't build up logistics. You don't have that possibility. Later, I asked him, I said, why did you play this scenario? Because this is unlikely. He said, sir, but try to karna chahiye na, to gain that confidence that even if this happens, we would be able to do it. And see, it's ironical, 4 years later, nearly the same scenario played out till a certain point. So he was bold. He wanted to try out things which many of us would hesitate to try out. So Aditya, now is Neeru ma'am. She would take on.
Niru ma'am, over to you. Niru ma'am.
And she would now conduct the thing.
Yeah, I mean, she would just.
Okay, these are concluding remarks, friends.
Yeah.
So Neeru Abrol ma'am would make them, and you all know her as the leading light of GCTC. So ma'am, over to you, please.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Namaskar to all the panelists and participants. My heartfelt tributes to CDS General Bipin Rawat, Mrs. Rawat, and other 11 Bravehearts. It's a great loss to the country.
Ma'am, can you please adjust your screen? Yeah.
Impossible to be filled. May the Almighty grant them eternal peace and strength to the family members to bear their loss. For the peace of their soul, let's all join and pray. I will recite Gayatri Mantra 3 times, and then I will be doing the Shanti part. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Om Dev Shanti Antariksham Shanti Prithvi Shanti Rapa Shanti Roshadhayah Shanti Vanaspataya Shantir Vishve Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvagam Shanti Shanti Reva Shanti Sama Shanti Redhi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you, ma'am. What a wonderful recitation of Shanti Path and Gayatri Mantra. That's a very appropriate way to pay homage to our departed CDS, his wonderful wife, and others, Brigadier Liddar, Colonel Harjinder, and pilots, Wing Commander Chauhan, and Wing Commander Ensing, and our brave soldiers like Teja, Satpal. I forget some of the names, I may be pardoned. I had written on a piece of paper, but in a hurry to get back from Sabatu, I left it somewhere. So, Aditya, what is next? You are going to close it now?
No, just this is end of the.
So, I would now like to thank everybody, especially the Army Commander Artrek, who showed us that what patience he showed, and he was with us all through. So, thank you, Jan Shukla sir, true to your sort of hallmark style. You not only educated us, and when you speak, you put it in such wonderful words. Sometimes you have to later go back to a dictionary and get the real meaning out of the words that you use. Like Shashi Tharoor uses certain amount of vocabulary. So, sir, you are also quite well schooled, and you use wonderful. Actually, I must
May
tell you,
not be exactly a compliment, sir, please.
no, I am using it as a compliment. You never complicate things. You say it in a wonderful way. I would like to emulate you, if I could. And I must tell you that Jal Rawat also had this wonderful quality. He was very well schooled and groomed. He could graduate to different language levels of communication, depending on what kind of crowd was with him. So here we come to end of this wonderful session. No amount of time can do justice to the life of such a wonderful soldier. No amount of words can also sum up what he was doing. And yet, we all have to remember that he would be the happiest in heaven if we were to take his legacy forward and not sit back and only grieve. We have to rise, buckle up, and take his agenda forward. The best tribute that we can pay to him is to take the legacy forward, get the theatre commands going, to do the reforms that he was so passionately involved about: technology, Atmanirbhar Bharat in indigenization of weapons, and manpower related reforms. If there are some feedbacks, they can be considered, they can be tweaked, but reform we must, because like what was brought out by earlier speakers like Jan Shukla and many others, he was against the status quo. And any armed forces which resigns itself to status quo means decay. We have to move forward, take his agenda forward. So Aditya, once again, thank you for putting this wonderful panel together. Maybe we can give last word to Gaurav Sawant, because these media anchors have a way to, sort of wrap up the issue and put it in some words which we are not capable of. So Jan Shukla sir, if you want to say something, you're most welcome in about 2-3 minutes, and then we can go to Gaurav Sawant to give that final distance, to close it up.
Okay, so the thought that was crossing my mind, it may still be early days, but Indian Army leadership is such a gathering of talent and such a wide pantheon. I was just recalling some names. The two field marshals, Karyappa and Manekshaw. One gave us this politicality, secular frame. We know Manekshaw's contribution, the most massive military victory in modern times. We've had S.K. Sinha, soldier, statesman, Zoru Bakshi, winner of a gallantry award in every rank from company to division. So in this great pantheon, where would General Rawat figure? And it will still be early days. The jury may still be out. But just, very early thoughts. I think we haven't had a resolute reformer of his kind. People have attempted reform in the past, but have backed off. And I think it may not be, I don't know what the views of the wider audience is, but I think he will go down in history as a resolute reformer. And I think those are my final thoughts on General Rawat, his great legacy and his great life.
Thank you, sir. Very aptly put. Resolute reformer, relentless modernizer. There are many ways we could sum up his legacy, and we'll run short of our adjectives that way. But resolute reformer seems to be apt, sir. Okay, Gaurav, you have the mic, you have the stage. So please sum it up with us with something which inspires all of us. Thank you.
So thank you very much. For me, it is a privilege. It is a privilege to be able to learn so much, not just about General Bipin Rawat, but the effort that is going in to not just making a stronger army or stronger armed forces, but the effort is to have a stronger nation. And with your permission, I look forward to writing about some of what has been said today. I will fall back on Aditya, for all the permissions in terms of your direct quotes to write about the effort that was on, and hopefully I will continue to report on that effort that will continue in the times ahead. Thank you very much, sir. It indeed, for me personally, it's a privilege to be a part of this August gathering to talk about General Bipin Rawat. And if I may, just last 30 seconds, there was one point, which once there was an incident when she was heading the Army Wives Welfare Association. There was this instance I was told, uh, which came to me as a story to report about a tiff within the army family, and a couple going their separate ways, and the effort she put in to bring that family back together. She was personally very invested in bringing both. It's almost like a parent bringing children together and ensuring that they're able to carry this forward. So that was something that we didn't do it as a story, but that is something that is where the Army Wives Welfare Association or the wives of our generals play such a crucial role in keeping the family together, sir.
Thank you,
Colonel
Gaurav.
KJ, sir, if I may just make, if you could allow me,
Please, sir.
one
Army
thought
commander
on.
can't be checked.
No,
He
no,
has
please.
the total distance, sir.
Very nice of you, sir. But this, I wanted to make this comment on this Avva. We all know that, of late, a lot of people have been banging Avva. But if Mrs. Geetika Liddar, and I hope I've got her name right, if she symbolizes the best of Avva, Avva is doing some excellent work. I mean, if she's a product of Avva, I mean, she is a leader in her own right. I have not seen a lady in recent times who has shown such leadership and such stoicness. It's beyond stoicness. It is leadership to be attend to other funerals when you've lost your own, to be so selflessness. I cannot think of there must be one of our ancient quotes which will put it much better. And if she has anything to do with Avva, if she has been grouped by Avva in any way, what a great tribute to Avva. I mean, that is another thought which crossed my mind. And I think in this hour of adversity, it has brought out the best of the armed forces. We have been very critical of some of the things that have been going on in the armed forces. But it just shows over the last 3-4 days that we are yet a very integrated, resolute, and a wonderful organization. That's one more thought.
If I may just spice it up with a little bit of this thing, sir, seasoning. Even Mrs. Harjinder, I am told, even when her husband's remains were not identified, she was giving her shoulder to these two girls. Imagine what selfless. And she was saying that this is the responsibility of our family to look after those girls. Here, her husband's remains have not been identified. They are grappling with that thing in the hospital, and she comes out and lends her shoulder and becomes part of that extended family. So these are wonderful examples. It touches. Actually, I was having difficulty to keeping my tears, under control. But when I see such things, I feel very proud. So I feel very proud, and I feel that 50 years that I spent in army were really worth it. Sir. And it also imposes great responsibility on us, because if public loves us so much, then we better not fail them. We have to always rise up to their expectations. And here, one last thing, sir, General Rawat, Army is known for zero tolerance on issues of probity. But General Rawat took the bar probably to the highest level. His personal integrity was of the highest level. And he lived very frugally, very simply. So lots of lessons, and sir, like what you are saying, AVA related lessons. I hope RTREC takes them forward. They are taken across to the country, because it's all about setting the message and narratives. And we must utilize it. In his passing away, he's given us a firm base to build up the correct narrative about our armed forces.
Just yesterday, I was at the Indian Military Academy, where, by the way, the Honorable President was there, and General Rawat was scheduled to attend.
So,
Had fate not been so cruel, he would have attended. And a fortnight back, I and the commandant went to invite him. And he was so, his boyish enthusiasm about the events where he was to speak, he was to deliver the address at the dinner night. And so I substituted for him, and I just said this, what General KJ has brought up. I told the passing out course that, of course, you have to live up to this great legacy of the past, the men that I quoted. You have to grapple with the futures. But the bigger legacy is the colossus of expectation from the nation and its citizens. And the grief of General Rawat has just shown how sincere, deep, and genuine it is. The standards that they hold us to. And I mentioned this to the cadets, and I said, henceforth, therefore, like General Rawat, you no longer have the choice to be ordinary. You just have to be extraordinary. And there was another thought that it just happened yesterday. And the IMA, sir, put such a lovely sound and light show. They dedicated to General Rawat and in his memory. And it was so well done. So another of those moments, like you said, you feel so proud to be part of the armed forces. The president was extremely appreciative of that sound and light show. Of course, we had taken out the celebratory aspects and made it somber. And it was dedicated to General Rawat. And we recall the fact that he was the winner of the Sword of Honor on the 63rd regular course. And by the way, I saw his cadet, his dossier, and it said that he was a boxer, he was an athlete, he was a footballer, and he was always this great pugilist. I don't know if you pronounce it right. I mean, if he got a knock on one chin, he gave it back with the other.
yes.
And then his dossier says that he's, forceful, a man of convictions, and whoever identified these qualities in him at that young age. I mean, he showed very early signs of brilliance, and then he grew into the lodestar that he became for the Indian Armed Forces in the nation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again. And Aditya, with your permission, we can wind it up.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, General Ganshram, also.
Thank you, KJ. Thank you.
General Gansham. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Admiral Sinha, sir. Thank you, Admiral Kosheva. Thank you, Brigadier. Thank you, General Dua.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you, Army Commander.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Thank you, General Dua, sir.
Thank you.